on properties. And so that's why, as Angela indicated, the league would recommend that we put that notice out there just in case, because right now, as you looked at the budget, you noticed that we're looking at the same ad valorem tax as what the 2022 budget was built on. And so if we exceed that, because the mill levy, it would increase, maybe the estimate is a little bit low and we get more, then we would run into a problem. And so the problem is we don't know how much to decrease our budget to account for that. And if you do decrease that and say the budget is, the estimate is high, we could further hurt ourselves by having a low or a high valuation, and it results in lower money, amount of money coming in, and then we've already decreased it. So it could be a difficult thing. So I think that it is prudent to try to keep the revenue neutral, but also allow in case there is a change in what we think the valuation is, because this is an estimate we're working on.
And just as a reminder, we need to certify our budget by August, so I'm not sure who put that timeline together.
Well, yeah, it's been that we are supposed to publish the notice of budget hearing by August 5th, have a hearing by August 15th, and certify to the county clerk by August 25th. So we don't.
If you don't exceed your revenue.
If you don't exceed your revenue. If we know we're going to exceed it, then we can extend that a little bit farther, but we won't be able to take advantage or know the exact amount, because that doesn't come out until November 1st.
Clear as mud?
Well, I'm just gonna say that I think the 2.96 mil decrease, because property taxes, I think, are really, like, the valuations went up drastically this last year. So I think people would appreciate that we still do that. If we still have to go through the process, I'm okay with that, but I definitely would like to still have that mil decrease.
Yeah, I'm certain you'll see a decrease. It's
Because
just,
otherwise, with the valuations and stuff, if we put like a 2 mil buffer in there, that would be almost 5 mil decrease, and then I don't know if we would have the shortfall if the estimations came up wrong. So I'm good with going through the process and continuing with the 2.96 mil levy decrease.
I am too. I think everyone's on the same page there. Anybody have questions before moving on?
no.
Well, I know that they're baked into that lower mill levy, that revenue neutral rate, was additional positions. I guess things got shifted. Do we want to go over those first, Angela, or do you think we should hear from outside agencies? I think it's important to recognize that this is a zero-sum game, right? As we're having these conversations, we need to recognize that anything we add in, we will need to take away somewhere else since we're moving forward with revenue neutral rate. So I don't know, out of respect for the outside agencies' time, I'd kind of like to hear from them first, if everyone's okay with that. And why don't we start with, anybody want to draw straws? Anyone want to go first?
I just, for the outside agency spending requests, which ones have increases?
All of them, I think.
No, I know you
Head
gave it to
director,
me,
yeah.
but just if you have it, I
I
just
think
write
it's
on the
startup
front page.
Hutchinson. It's
What's their increase?
30.
and all that's going to be
It's on the
Yeah.
back of the
on the
packet.
back of budget.
I know I got it, I just.
Yeah, this
I wanted to
paragraph
pencil it in real quick.
right below tells you, startup Hutch is 30,000. The Chamber of Commerce was hired, but I believe we reduced it to a 40,000 increase.
Chamber of Commerce, please.
And then there's 100,000 for the architect for downtown Hutchinson.
And that's new.
That's new.
And then one that came in Friday, late Friday afternoon, and we didn't have a chance to put it in here, is we have a proposal from the Rec Commission with regard to the Healthy Neighborhood Incentive Program.
And that 20 needs to be added down here.
That's 20,000?
Yes, yes.
It just occurred to me that Steve isn't here. I'm sorry. Did he indicate he wasn't going to be here?
Oh, no, he didn't say one way or the other.
Okay, I'm moving on. I'll text him.
So 190K. Additional funding. All right, I just wanted to have that in mind prior to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and start with you, Deborah?
Thank you all. So I think you should have had in front of you, and I don't know if you have my entire budget request letter. Maybe Gary provided that to you. But we have enjoyed a long-time partnership with the city in regards to several economic development programs that for many years, the budget allocation comes as one allocation to the chamber, but then it is divided across several of our operating entities. So last year, our budget was $230,000, and that was divided across the 4 entities, which include Greater Hutch, which is our economic development arm, Market Hutch, which is an entire pass-through organization for marketing that you see across the region and the state on behalf of Hutchinson. Growth Inc., which is a development arm that works to develop new sites and buildings in the community, and it has a small budget, but is accomplishing some big things in this year. And then the most recent addition to the 4 entities that we've been operating, and this has been a relationship for the last 3 years, is Downtown Hutch. And we're going to get into some detail about Downtown Hutch because it's where we're asking for the largest increase this year. So in the letter that I provided to Gary about our budget request, I know it's a larger pill to swallow, and I wanted to have the opportunity to explain. We did ask initially for a $70,000 increase. And across those 4 operating entities, that's a marginal increase for Greater Hutch and Market Hutch of $5,000 per, to give each of those divisions a $100,000 operating budget. Those are combined in day-to-day with some funding from Reno County and private sector funding. So it's not the entirety that makes those 2 entities work. So know that there are other partners that help in economic development. So the 4 goals of economic development really are the business recruitment and retention of businesses to our community, which helps grow our local economy, and as well as just general promotion of the local economy to help us grow. But all of those are underpinned by workforce development. And I would say the largest increase in the amount of activity that we do on behalf of the community lately is helping solve our workforce equation. And that is not going to be a short-term fix. It's really going to be a long-term fix over a generation of how do we continue to get people here into the jobs that are available in the community. So I'm going to leave behind a report that talks about some of the ways that we're doing that with Career Quest programs, with signing day events, working with our workforce partners to increase the visibility of workforce availability and programs in the community. The result of all of the work of economic development over the last year has resulted in 400 primary new jobs created in the economy, which is a blessing because it's what's keeping this economy growing. I know if you asked any employer, they would say though, it maybe isn't a blessing to them because they're all, trying to chase after that same limited workforce, which is why we have to keep growing that pie. The good news is that the work we're doing is ratcheting our performance up within our state and national economy, so much so that Hutchinson moved from the top 100 cities in the country for economic performance at a place of 55 a year ago to moving up to 27th in the country now. And we're outpacing all of those other peers that we like to point to as aspirational. So I think that that's a great accolade, and you can't buy that kind of advertising. You can only rank there by actually performing in our economic growth. So we've been working to bring new product on as we started filling buildings in the community that were once vacant. We have a new spec building that's going to be coming out of the ground thanks to everyone working together. We have a new industrial park that is going to come online, we hope, in the next 2 years. But at the same time, we're actually bringing people to the community to fill buildings and industrial parks that we have. 2 weeks from now, an international company that we've been working with and that your city staff has put together a tremendous amount of utility information for is coming to take a look at the industrial park. We get them for 2 hours to meet with them, take them out by the park, and we know that we're on the short list for them and their company internationally. The first week of July, we're hosting a company from Florida that's taking a look at the spec building. So all of the marketing that we do on your behalf is really starting to pay off. Which is why it's important that we continue to seed Growth Inc. to look to new site development over the next couple of years, as well as some of the retooling of Market Hutch. So we'll be unveiling for our chamber board tomorrow, and then for the community at our membership luncheon on Wednesday, the new Market Hutch campaign that has been designed by Bowercom. That was part of our work in the first quarter of this year, was contracting with Bowercom to do a complete refresh of the marketing on behalf of the community. So we'll be rolling out that marketing plan to you. Downtown Hutch, though, is where we have asked for the lion's share of an increase. Initially, I presented to Gary in the letter that we would like to increase downtown Hutch funding by $60,000, which is basically adding a staff person. So far, we have been providing in-kind staffing for downtown Hutch, and the $20,000 that you have been funding goes strictly into marketing and programming of our downtown. All of the other behind-the-scenes work, from managing the IWW program, collecting on IWW loans, doing all of the marketing, design of the corner signs, design of flag signage, design of the marketing that goes out, was all being done in kind by the chamber team. And the good thing is you get the economies of scale of a team that's doing a variety of things, so you're not having to pay for all of those added services. But what we've seen is our business activity in downtown is vibrant. In the last 5 years, we've had 55 new business starts on Main Street, 12 of those in the last year. The IWW loans, we have done an additional 12 IWW loans, as well as servicing the past loans, which is a blessing because it's getting dollars turning through the economy, seeding, along with other programs like Startup Hutch, new business activity that we work hand in hand on almost every project for downtown. But at the end of the day, it really deserves a person full-time doing that work. You probably saw the article in the Hutch News that said we have 140,000 vacant square feet. So even though we have 55 new businesses filling vacant space, we still have a long ways to go to fill vacant space on Main Street. As a Kansas Main Street community and a national Main Street community, it really deserves the full-time staffing of a position, which is what we asked for in this budget. As I said, we know that that's a tough thing when you're also trying to toe the line on budget. So Gary and I had an honest conversation about, could we in this next year simply invest as a community in the master plan? And if so, then look to staffing that full-time after the master plan is complete. And my response to that is, I hope that during the master planning process, everyone can appreciate that that's also going to take some navigating of someone working that process behind the scenes alongside the planning group. We do have a dedicated group of organizations that are supporting the master plan. Hutch Rec, the Community Foundation, Startup Hutch, and several other individuals that are passionate about downtown feel strongly enough that they're underwriting half of the cost and asking the city to share in that cost. But we would like you to consider sharing in the cost of a person to help manage that process and moving forward. And so I think what Gary has presented to you is a total of a $40,000 budget increase across the board, $10,000 of that being for Market Hutch and Greater Hutch, $30,000 for a half-time person to staff downtown. And if so, I'm in the process of interviewing candidates for some other roles at the chamber. I think that there is a way that within Greater Hutch we can add a half-time person, and that would greatly benefit downtown Hutch in the long run. So we do some grant writing, and I would say that's happened to be other duties as assigned right now for my staff. Last year, we benefited from receiving $31,000 in grant funds that came to us, which is just a pass-through that helped Lavera Properties, as well as a new Neon Alley project that we're working on with Hutch Rec. So we hope Those kinds of grant activities could really be ratcheted up if we had at least a half-time, but maybe a full-time person working on behalf of downtown and the community to do some of that kind of digging to find grant opportunities that would benefit all of us. And I think really then it kind of pays for itself by having a position like that. So, sorry to take up so much time, but that in a nutshell is what we've asked for in the budget this year, and we would appreciate your support of that, but also our partners. Like I said, we can't do any of these activities in a silo without the loan programs that work at Startup Hutch, without the neighborhood work that Tony and I share in. $20,000 of our economic development budget goes directly to help seed programming that's happening in the healthy neighborhood work, and none of it could happen without these partnerships. So thank you to you, and thank you to these partners that make it all work. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I had a question about, so it's a $40,000 additional allocation plus the $100,000 downtown, for the downtown master plan. I was wondering, I know preliminary conversations have been had about the city providing water to the proposed industrial park in South Hutch, and I'm wondering if that cost is baked into the budget?
No.
No.
No, we haven't. We're researching some information on that. I think Brian hopes to have maybe some of the preliminary information by, say, around the first part of July, and then we'll look at it and see if we need to go further or whether we can crunch the numbers on that. And if we need to go farther, it could be maybe September by the time we would have that information.
Do you anticipate that being a net increase in revenue to the city of Hutch, or would that be more of a subsidized thing that we did for economic development regionally?
Well, you mean as far as if we are to provide water and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things we really don't know at this time is when the water would be needed, and that, that could be, in a year, it could be
I see.
5 years.
So it wouldn't necessarily benefit next year's budget
Right.
even?
I would
Okay.
anticipate it won't have any effect on, or at least we haven't built anything in to next year's budget.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from council?
So I know in 2019 is when you guys took over kind of the downtown Hutch position from us. That saved us close to $80,000, is that what it was?
Ballpark, I would say.
Ballpark, if I remember right, I'm trying to find it. So I know we saved 80,000, and then did we increase it by 20,000 last year, so since then? Because wasn't it $200,000 originally?
I think we increased it 10,000 the first year and then maybe
10.
20 last year.
Yeah, okay, I'm just trying to follow the money. No, so we have so we increased it. We increased it by 40,000 for that position that we transferred over from the savings. We still have a $10,000 saving for this year on top of the 90,000 or 80,000 savings we had the first year. Plus the 60,000. I mean, if we do give them the 40,000, we still have a net gain from the elimination of the position. But if there was any more increases on that particular thing, we wouldn't have any more net gain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think to adequately add a full-time person, I was budgeting
Yeah.
60,000 for staffing. Obviously, that's limited, and when you need to provide employee benefits and things. But I really do think that's kind of where you get the economies of scale of the fact that our back office accounting isn't getting charged to downtown. Some of the marketing support of other roles at the chamber isn't getting passed on to downtown. So, I think what Gary had budgeted was a $40,000 increase from our total request of $70,000.
Yeah, which 30,000 of that is
It's
basically-
downtown and 10 is Greater Hutch and Market Hutch.
Right.
Mhm.
Oh, is that in the revenue neutral rate budget, or do we have to come up with the 40,000?
No, that's already plugged in
This 40,000 is?
to the revenue neutral.
Okay.
The
Are
only
all of
thing-
these plugged into the revenue neutral, or?
Except for the 20,000 from Hutch Road.
Yeah, it's plugged in there, but then again, there, as you go through.
Yeah, we have to,
Yeah, you may decide, but, because it came in later, the 20,000 for the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative is the only thing that is not right now.
I've got a quick, so a big part of this role would be grant writing, which I know there's been conversations that we feel like we're lacking on grant writing as a community. One question I would have is, we've applied for funds, grant funds for Memorial Hall study. Could that be applied to this downtown study to help offset some of the costs?
I don't, Justin, maybe you could, we did talk a little bit about that. I think there are a little bit different studies, as I recall.
Or if that can be broken out
Uh,
by the entity that's being contracted with, to just have Memorial Hall, just so we can use those grant funds toward that part of it.
And we might, maybe you could explain what the Memorial Hall, and then Deborah, because I don't have the information of what the downtown study, maybe they could tell you what their studies are doing, will be
It
doing.
was gonna be a 40% match, correct?
Correct,
The city had agreed to 25,000.
correct.
And I know we've talked behind the scenes, we think that this city planner, obviously he would look at Memorial Hall as a part of our downtown, and I don't know, I guess,
Yes.
what do you think?
I think the two could work together. I think if we do the Memorial Hall study first, then somebody who's looking holistically at downtown could take that information and plug it in. So it might reduce their scope a little bit for the overall downtown. The study we're gonna look at will take a historic perspective on the building as well. So we'll take into account the history of the building and historic preservation of the building. So I think that's one unique factor to that study. The other thing is we have already agreed to accept the grant, so I don't know, obviously we haven't spent the funds and it's a reimbursement, so I'm sure we probably could get out of it if we really wanted to, but just moving forward, I just don't know how well that makes us look the next time we go to apply for a grant, since we have already accepted it. But I think that the primary outcomes should be kind of an overall view of the building, so structurally, mechanically, they're gonna look at the building as a structure, and then they're gonna look at the highest and best uses of it. So I think it could kind of flow nicely into another study that's looking at all of downtown. If they already know that the highest use of Memorial Hall is X, then they can kind of build from that, so.
Who is they? We haven't even put out an RFP, have
We have not put out the RFP, we've just accepted the grant from the state.
Okay, yeah. I think possibly the gentleman that we're talking to should probably see if he can do that work as a part of his scope of work. I know that he does some of that, and he does, he's done the Salina project, I believe, and the Oklahoma project, and they do look at specific buildings and the best use for them, and suggestions, and even plans for them. So I don't know if that would work or not, but I appreciate you bringing that up, because we have talked about that.
How much was that grant?
So our share is 25,000, so the other share, so the 60% would be 35, 40, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, that'd be a big chunk of our obligation, be a
Yeah.
third of the
We'd be walking
cost.
away from,
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I don't know if he would be willing to do that would meet the historical, the view of it.
Or if that would change the $100,000 ask, if, for the downtown study, if we were to carve out Memorial Hall. I mean, does that change it to a $70,000?
Is that the downtown architect? I was wondering how those.
That's where I was going with that.
That's where you were going.
Would you like me to elaborate on the scope of what that request
Yeah.
is? I alluded to it in my letter of request, but it isn't actually our organization that probably will receive those funds. I think the group that was asking for the downtown master plan study, at least the feedback I had last week was that that might either run through the city budget, and if so, it might require a full RFQ, and I'm not sure about that. Or could it run through the community foundation or Hutch Rec, because the matching funds are philanthropic dollars that probably want to go through a 501c3, which my organization is not. But we have interviewed a couple of different firms. The group that has been vetting these feels very strongly that the capabilities of the Olsen Studio are very strong. They've done work, as Greg said, in Salina, as well as some other peer communities that I would say are aspirational and would look at the fabric of downtown from a holistic perspective. I don't know that it would get as granular as looking at a particular need of what Memorial Hall needs in order to be repurposed. So we have already squeezed this gentleman tight on price. He started at about a $250,000 mark, and we have asked him to whittle everything out to get us to a $200,000 budget, meaning that a lot of us are doing in-kind work for that other $50,000 benefit, so that we can still not have a watered down study, that we're taking on much of that boots on the ground work. I couldn't promise that it's going to accomplish what Justin has applied for with the Memorial Hall study. It will definitely look at Memorial Hall and the surrounds as part of the recommendations, but it's probably not going to take a structural look or and what that needs to be enhanced to be, used for another 50 years.
What are some of the things that have come out of Salina and
I think that we probably have all been to Salina and seen much of the transformation of their downtown going back about 10 to 15 years. They started their master planning process with a look at what attractions and enhancements needed to be made to bring activity back to their downtown, and it's proving itself out. The most notable things were the construction of the field house, the car museum that were used as Starbond projects to then generate a Starbond district. They've also established a CID district and other taxing mechanisms that you can use to leverage those dollars for public improvements to their main street. And I couldn't speak to the economics of all of what that has generated, but it's meant a new hotel in their downtown. It's meant new restaurants and retail. It's meant new,
we have to have a
patrons.
master plan to get those grant funding?
A lot of times.
I just, sometimes we
A lot of
have,
times you do have to have a strategic plan before grantors will.
do you use the master plan as a supplement to the grants when you're doing the proposals, like is it an item that you would?
It's definitely something that we can lean on for, not only for grant funding, but when we're working with investors that are looking at bringing projects to our community, they want to understand that if they're investing multi-million dollars in a geography of downtown or 61 or any one of our commercial corridors, that the city has a planned way to develop around them that is going to lead to everyone's success. And if they see organic growth is great. We've had a tremendous amount of organic growth as a community that's leveraged public investment for the private investment that has been generated to the tune of, I think, $70 million in the last decade in our downtown, which is fantastic. But there's that constant question of what is next and where should it go and what other enhancements are needed to make that happen. What are the parking situations? What are the signage needs? Where would we best direct the next phase of private investment? And so sometimes that does look at Memorial Hall. Sometimes it looks at the area around MAPS and SDI. Sometimes it looks at the landmark. What we have is an extremely large downtown environment that needs some planning around it in order for us to direct investment that's going to pay off in the best way. And so most people looking to make investments, especially, let's say if we had a hotel developer that said, I want to invest in a hotel downtown, right now we don't really have a roadmap for where that would go. And we have other partners in the room that have been really part of that process. Aubrey, Jackson, Tony, Greg's been
It would
loosely
be-
on the committee.
Yeah, I would be interested to see how a master plan would incorporate our southern part of Main Street. Since it's kind of, we have like this weird industrial section that kind of like sits next to an empty section and then right before our big beautiful park. And so,
Yeah, our original downtown Main Street plan that I think Jim Sightnader did, now probably 20 years ago, did incorporate a plan for C onto the park entrance. It's just we have not been able to leverage federal and state funding to, parlay that into the revitalization like we did in other segments. So we did like a section at a time. So I know that exists. I don't know how relevant it is now, or if we would need to engage stakeholders on that end before we would, make any major strategic move. But
would the master plan be looking at all of that?
I would think,
though?
right, Deborah, would it be all the way down to the park?
It may not go all the way as far south as the park, but definitely would encompass some of the development that has occurred just south of the railroad tracks. I don't know if it's been fully determined that it would go as far south as the park, but we can definitely encourage the planners to look at that area. I think there's great opportunity as long as you have willing
Yeah.
property owners that are willing to go along with the plan, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, having a plan also helps us put together what kind of incentive packages we need as a community to help incentivize people to do things. South Main Street.
South of Sea. Yeah.
And it's tough because that's always been an industrial part of Main Street, because that's where the water came in for the mill to generate.
There's an extraordinary amount of industry down there, as we learned when there was an effort to,
Long-established,
Yeah.
very large businesses.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, probably 30 businesses that a lot of people you don't hear about every day. So their input's going to be really critical in their buy-in. So I'm excited about moving forward with the downtown plan. I think I was hoping that we could wrap up outside agency requests by 4, so would like to have council's input on this request and whether you'd like
I
to see
would
it.
echo your sentiments. I'm excited about downtown. I think we have an opportunity here with the momentum that's going. Obviously, Jillian's was a hit this weekend, but Sarah, part of this deal is because somebody is, wanting to put some of the private funds with this, and felt like the city ought to step up and help with that. And not just privately, there's other.
I just hate to spend all that money and then it's one of those master plans that sits undone for 15 years.
Part
Because of
of,
budget constraints.
part of the reason this Olson agency, in my mind, might be a good fit is there is some follow through for like 5 years. So, we can do studies all day long. We've been down this road. This is not really a study. This is more of a plan. Here's what you do, and here's how you do it, and how are you doing? There's accountability from him to us. I think, that's the impression I got. So
But
much
it's a
more.
5-year follow-up.
And it's, there's a road, I would call this a roadmap we're gonna study, a roadmap of highest and best things that we can do as a community, short-term and long-term. There's recommendations that's going to be the spectrum of things that we can do in the short term to enhance the environment of downtown, to continue to attract investment, and things we need to be doing as a community at year 5, clear through year 10. I think that the city's comprehensive plan speaks to the need for this. When we had the Catalyst group in here to do a retail gap analysis 5 years ago, we measured retail gaps, but we took a quick lens at looking at downtown and what is needed. And this was one of the steps that they recommended was needed too, that we need a master planned area that we can, from there, make good decisions about what is a CID district. Should we have a business improvement district designated where people in that district have buy-in for the enhancements that need to happen in downtown, but without an overlay district that says those things need to happen. Right now, it's just us saying,
Speculation.
making speculation, yes.
Are we making a mistake having a half employee on this? And the reason I ask, and maybe it's this first year because it's implementation, but I know of projects that have happened downtown where there's not a go-to person. They get someone from different departments, they get people from different private, and they're told a lot of things, and then they make a purchasing decision on a building, and come to find out it's not the way it was presented, and people were confused on what the project was. I mean, there should be a point person, whether it's a city employee or a chamber employee, that is the downtown person. And I think we're missing that, and it's costing people in town that are trying to develop properties. And that's what I'm asking, are we making a mistake having a half-time position for this? If we're gonna do this, do we need to go further with the position? And maybe that's not this year, maybe that's next year, but I'm asking for other input on this.
Well, I'll speak to that. I feel like if we value our downtown and if we think it's important, it certainly warrants a full-time person.
Even the city had a full-time person that we paid $53,000 a year for the salary, but we integrated responsibilities over to them. So would you have a, because I've also heard of people getting, no, you need to get on the city, no, you need to go to the right? And nobody really, yeah, it's a real big problem actually, because people feel like, do I talk to city manager, do I talk to planning, do I talk to the chamber? Everybody's telling me to go somewhere else.
One of the things that we do have is a database of downtown buildings. Does the person that we have allocated a bit of time, in-kind time for this, have intimate knowledge of every single one of those buildings from a code footprint standpoint? No. Should the city be able to have someone on the planning staff that can answer clear questions about what code enhancements need to happen to a building when we have someone interested in it? My opinion would be yes. I know we've had a lot of turnover recently, and I think that's a problem when then you lose that historical knowledge of a person that has been with the city for many, many years, and now there's a new person in that role, and they may not have the answers. But I do think that this is a partnership, and so far the partnership, when it was handed to us, was marketing and promotion. And that is what we have done, and I think we've done that well. If what we're looking for the next chapter of downtown is going back to having a person that is more of a planner that can answer technicalities about what you can and cannot do with a piece of real estate, I think that that's a function that inherently belongs in city planning. But that person probably isn't a person that's out marketing your community every day. So they're two definitely different skill sets. And I think there will still need to be a partnership. If you have someone tasked and every day they're beating the streets, marketing downtown, working with business owners to enhance the environs of downtown, we are still going to need to have someone in city planning that can answer what, from a code enforcement standpoint, needs to happen with a piece of real estate that has been vacant for many years.
I agree with that. I'm kind of going off of if Greg was new to town and he was looking at a property and we had a person in this role, would they be the champion as far as, hey, what are you wanting to do? Let me make a call to the planning department and see that. Let me call inspections to do this, and then, that point person, instead of hiring a general contractor and an architect and all that just to see if it's even feasible. And I think that's where there's been some disconnect is, to be fair, city employees want to see a plan. They want to know what the plan is. We want to see it. Well, I don't want to invest in that just yet. I don't want to pay someone to come up with a plan just to see if it's feasible. And I think this person could fill that role, not as a planner, but just as a, hey, I know who to call in town to answer the questions, kind of give them a feel for it. And I think that's what we're lacking. I think we've had that before, and I think that's what we're lacking. But I think at some point it needs to be a full-time position.
I know that's what I want, trying to be careful here not to ask for too much. I know that it worked really well 10 years ago, Sarah, when I did my project. I didn't like how hard it was, but it worked well. We had a guy at the city, we got together with some building inspectors, the fire chief, you know, it all seemed to work. And I know,
But we eliminated that
Yeah,
position.
I
Now,
understand
I
that.
think, are you saying, maybe that's where the trouble comes in. We've also upped our contributions to the chamber for that. So do we reduce the amount of money that we give to the chamber and we hire somebody at the city again? Because we found out that the last 3 years wasn't working?
You know, I think it's a different environment now than it was 3-4 years ago.
There's a lot more going on in downtown. I would like to point out something that I maybe should have noted at the beginning of the conversation, in addition to the revenue neutral. That's not the only consideration. Angela did a great job of putting together some graphs, and on page 5, you'll see our structural balance. And I think this is something we should always keep top of mind when we have a budget conversation. It's just basically total revenues versus total expenditures. And so perhaps I'm reading it wrong, but it doesn't seem like we're on the right track for reaching a point where our expenses are meeting our revenues. I mean, we're far exceeding, which may be fine in an environment like today with ending balance that's pretty generous. But we will get to a point, if we stay on this trajectory, where we eat, over the course of a few years, we eat that overage, right? I mean, that,
Generally, we don't spend all that we budget to spend, so generally it fixes
itself.
itself in the next year. But it is something we have to monitor with inflation and everything that's going on right now.
So do you think with the, what is it, about a $3 million gap, do you think that's going to,
It's not gonna-
Neutralize?
No, not completely.
no? What do you think is a more realistic, what is that gap in reality?
So, I mean, I think best case, normal situation, you might underspend revenue by $1 million.
Okay.
But I don't think it would be much more than that. So this plan does look at using up some of the reserves that we do have. But then at the end of the year, we would probably still be within our policy for fund balance.
Okay. And I'm fine with using reserves because our reserves are at a historic high. I'm just not fine with creating a scenario that in 5 years we have no reserves. Does that make
I
sense?
know I've looked at the past, and I haven't done it, it's been a while, maybe 4 or 5 months. But if you go and look at the budget and then the audit for the actuals, we are usually over like $1 million, $1.5 million
Mhm.
that we usually over budget. Last year we were more than that, I'm gonna assume, when it comes back in, when we get that audit in, but the previous year we were over, what was it, like, 2 or 3? I can't remember what it was. But generally, it is about $1 million, $1.5 million that we over budget, if you look at your audit compared to.
Mhm.
And I
So
think 20 and 21, we really watched our expenditures.
Yeah, and it would be that bigger. But if you look back at 2016, 17, and 18, it's at that.
Yeah, and the current plan right now
$3
is
million, probably not, so I do understand what you're saying. We'll have to,
But I do think with this amount of reserves on the table, now's the time to invest in the programs and projects that are gonna move our community forward, right? So I'm all for that, I just want us to be aware of that.
Well, I mean, if we pay for someone that does grant writing and brings more grants in than what their
Mhm.
salary is, that's good for the community in general.
Yeah. Yeah, this position could very well pay for itself.
but how does that plug into their 40K asking? Because if we decide to staff that, wouldn't we not give, because that's what they're wanting that extra amount for?
We'd give them an extra 30, right? And then we'd have to,
With the way it's designed now, yes.
We have to find that 30, so.
then we have to find that 30 somewhere. And I'll just go ahead and throw this out right now. I'm gonna be advocating heavily for the additional neighborhood development position, because I know that both Garza and myself have heard from multiple neighborhoods and constituents that they want to see more work being done in the neighborhood development. So, just throwing that out there. Now we're up to 50, if I can convince 2 other people that we have to find elsewhere.
And I think the other thing, of course, to be aware of, I mean, it's kind of hard to know what the economy is going to do, but I think the next couple of years is going to be a little bit bumpy. And so you kind of have to keep that in mind. Gas prices are high. We don't know how long inflation and those kind of things. And that could, you know, be in the next year or so. I know if the economy goes into recession, that could hurt the sales tax revenues and also could even the valuations if the housing market were to slide.
Jake, can I say something?
Yeah, aren't we a couple of wet blankets?
I know I'm not sitting at the table, but I just, from the Community Foundation's perspective, I want to say that I think downtown entrepreneurship and neighborhood development all go hand in hand, and the Community Foundation has invested in each one of those things for us at a high level, not the same rate as what you're investing, but for us it's been a lot. And what I've seen is really strong relationships between those organizations and the people they serve. I go to the downtown coalition meetings, the people who attend there attend religiously, they know each other, they care about each other, they're bonding together, they care about what the chamber is providing to them. In that case, I see it for Startup Hutch and their participation in Hutch Rec. I hear a lot of good things about neighborhood development. That's why we continue to invest in them, in all 3 of them. And I think that momentum is good, the relationships are good, and the leverage on the investment is good because we're getting more and more and more. And so I think about the city's investment 20 years ago in the streetscape, was it 20 years ago? Whatever you've invested, I mean, we just continue to get more and more out of it. So this new investment in a plan and in staff can really move all these efforts forward. So a plan for downtown, staff for neighborhood development, continuing Startup Hutch. The momentum is so good and it feels like the time to just keep it moving. Well, I'm saying if, instead of giving the chamber the 40K for them to have the staff, the city would bring back our staff. So there was a point person.
I hear you.
Why would we do both?
I think you could argue that point, but I'll tell you what I'm seeing coming out of these organizations and the relationships they've developed tells me to stay on that course and not change it up now. And,
So you're
that-
recommending that we do not bring the staff back for the city, and we let the chamber handle that staff position?
I've thought about this a
What?
lot.
Yeah.
And I thought about having a gym site neighbor 2.0
Yeah.
on city staff. And I think putting it under the chamber instead of under the city's purview would be better in regards to the business owners working with someone from the chamber to work with the city on their behalf.
What's the
And
chamber
market
feel about
downtown
having
and
an
help with
actual
grants.
full-time employee, like, so when somebody needs to talk to that person talks directly to planning in Hutchinson, have the same capabilities as if we were to hire, like, the same capabilities as somebody who was hired by the city.
They're not a planner as much as they know who to call to get
Yeah.
answers at the city level. And the process is at the city and how to navigate downtown development. That's where I was looking at it. Because I thought about that, you know, we could have an associate planner / downtown person, but I don't think that goes as far as if you're a small business owner looking to develop downtown, having someone on the economic development side rather than under the city's purview.
I know, but I was just thinking of oversight. If we give the funding to have that person at the chamber, are they going to be fulfilling that commitment?
I think there's a natural fit at the chamber. What we're trying to do in the downtown corridor is increase investment, increase businesses. That's what they do day in and day out.
But we have had issues in the past where they had vacancies in positions where we were funding them, and they had a vacancy where she had to wear 2 hats. And we were a little upset that they didn't fill that position that we were
There-
funding.
I don't think that's accurate. I don't know that we've had a vacancy where we have had funding coming in from the city in any position. We haven't had staffing funding from the city for downtown.
There's,
I'm not
what the
talking about
funding has been
downtown,
for.
I'm not talking about downtown.
there's such a strong push for development downtown that you would have people that are in downtown showing up with pitchforks and torches complaining about this person if they weren't fulfilling their needs or their role because they
Okay.
want it so bad.
I did appreciate, though, that city manager asked that we include the part-time person, because I think it fits better for our needs. We absolutely need a staff member in there and to build some capacity while we're doing the plan. But with the economic uncertainty on the horizon, I would be hesitant to hire a full-time person that we're gonna have to cut next year. I would like us to see us
Yeah.
move forward with just as it's presented. I don't think it should be at the city. I think the chamber is uniquely qualified. I don't want to set them up for failure either.
Well, I would be fine with that and the intent that if need arises, that it converts to a full-time position after the plan is developed.
How long do you think the plan, I mean, that's going to take us several months. Do we need to I guess we're not sending it out for RFP because we've already selected a partner.
Possibly. Not
Does
sure
that
what
run
that
There was,
Foul
there was
of
an
our-
anticipated timeline.
Does that run
There's a
foul of
one-year
our
timeline
procurement
from start to
guidelines?
finish for
They're
the
paying
plan.
for it, we get them the money, it's fine.
Okay.
And the plan, the scope of services as presented was scoped to start in '22 and complete 1 year later in that month of '23. If we don't receive funding until the 2023 budget, that's going to delay the time of the planning, which is fine. I do think that if we are only budgeted for a half-time position, the skill set for that position really needs to be an organizational person that works with local businesses, that gathers the tribe for the work of the planning, because this plan is very heavy on local engagement, and it needs to be someone that can help Olson organize and be the boots on the ground to organize the process. I don't think I would be hiring in a half-time person a planner type. So I don't want to lay the expectation that we're hiring a city planner type staffing person in this person.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to be doing.
I do not have that expectation. I would remind the council that we are going to be hiring a city planner. And hopefully, Gary, if you hire him or the next city manager hires him, we need to have this conversation with him and.
Or her.
Or her, or their assistant as well, because I understand there's 2 positions available in that area. And I don't know if that puts your mind at ease a little bit, Sarah.
I just know we've had difficulties with some developments between not knowing who to talk to.
And after this meeting, I would love to have a list of what those are, because I can't point to what projects may have happened in the last 3 years that didn't have everyone all on the same team pulling together, but I'd love to have examples, because I myself would like to know.
If there's one person to go to, it's one throat to choke to find every answer you want, and one person to blame.
There will never be one person, though. It's always going to be a partnership to your,
But you could, if someone's new to town, you could point, here's the person you can
Yeah,
contact if you want to develop
yeah.
downtown. They'll help you out.
How many positions do we have open in planning?
Well, we got the planner, we've got we got room for a senior planner and then I think they call it associate planner. So, and so we're trying to get the technical assistance now. Jim and his staff are doing a good job. But once we get the technical person, and I think it is a good thing to be able to work with somebody at the chamber on this, so that we are able to, get the right people with the right skill sets and try to make this work out the best. Somebody with experience in this area.
Well, is council okay with moving forward with the part-time as presented, or is there more
I'm okay
appetite for
with
full-time?
moving as presented.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes left for the outside presentation.
Well, we're not going to meet the timeline, so, but that's okay. Does that give staff enough direction on that?
If everyone's okay with that, then we'll move in that direction.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Jackson, you're up.
Do you need to go?
Are you
Well,
next?
mine
after listening to that, my discussion might relate to what you just decided a little bit. Is that okay?
By all means.
Okay, go ahead.
I can go last.
All right. So, I don't know that this is a proposal more than it's a discussion based off our joint meeting back in April about the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, and just as Aubrey said and Jay just said, the constant request from community members to do more neighborhoods, do more things in that. And, we're right now, we have one coordinator level position that is funded between 3 organizations, HUTCHREC, the city, and the chamber. The way that breaks down is 20,000 from the chamber, 20,000 from the city of Hutch, and then 27,700 from HUTCHREC. Primarily that is mostly staffing. There is about $6,600 in programming that we do through that. To do more, we just need another position. And so been trying to figure out what that looks like. I think and as far as HUTCHREC's pay classification schedule, a manager title fits better than hiring just another coordinator. We would want somebody, as Deborah said, that can bring organizational skills, think big picture. It's very interesting listening to your conversation around downtown. We get a lot of that through the neighborhoods as far as housing, as far as just development in general through our Healthy Neighborhood Initiative. Adam goes to the housing, or Adam Stewart's our current coordinator for Healthy Nation. He's at the housing committee meetings all the time, talking about what he's hearing in the neighborhoods. And to what John said, he's kind of that liaison between the public and the city. He knows who to call, right? He knows a great relationship with PD as we hear those things. So that's where we started. Of course, we had quite a bit to that position. So before I scare you with numbers, what is that general? Are you interested in that? It's a full-time with benefits position. That on the high end, $80,000, low end, 65, 70, just depends on benefits that they choose to take with health insurance and so forth.
Oh, that's not the 20,000?
Well, I've got some cost-saving things that I can share, but I wanted to talk about the appetite for the position, to Jade's point about, I don't want to go down this road and then in 1 year, we're not doing it. The halftime position, and again, Deborah and I have not had a chance to vet this out with each other, but maybe the skill set isn't too far off from what your part-time person and what my manager position is. Maybe we start there as kind of that, contact with the city, the liaison, whether the business is in downtown or whether the business is in Creekside or wherever, but the housing as well, that's where those individuals kind of stop at, come to first, to know where they're, to go to Jackson, whether to go to the city, where do they go? And then they have the skill to put programs together and so forth.
Are you suggesting merging the two fundings to fund a
I don't know,
full-time person?
it's just an idea. After listening to what the discussion, I was more of the idea that when you guys were talking about a downtown, it would be more of a planner, and that wouldn't fit what this is. But after hearing that discussion, the skill set's very similar to what this position would do, as far as that.
So would that
instead of
require?
funding two part-time, we combine the funding and find a person that works full-time, that's the whole shebang?
It would be a full-time, maybe we have to change the name of the Healthy Neighborhood Initiative. I don't know, maybe it's Downtown and Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, I don't know. But understanding that that's a way to get us started, to see where the work goes from there.
That seems like an awful lot of work for
Yeah.
one person.
Well, it's halftime. I don't know how you're gonna get it with halftime. When,
Yeah,
I didn't want to interrupt, not my discussion, but I think it was John that asked, can we get this done with a halftime? To find a person with that skill set for part-time work, guys, I think it's hard to find people with that skill
Yeah.
set for full-time work with benefits, right? Now you're gonna ask that, the competencies of what that individual needs to do that. Now you're asking to do that in just part-time work.
Would you want to combine the funding for a full-time person and share?
So then you can write me a check instead of
Maybe we
writing
could
you a
just
check?
exchange checks, yeah, you know, I don't know. We would have to vet that out. You know, the sheet I have in front of me, so your discussion that Gary had earlier with revenue neutral and all of those things, we're in that same boat at Hutchinson, right? We have to figure out what that looks like. The direction right now is we will exceed, we will go to the exceeding the revenue neutral, just with the cost of us doing business and so forth. We're gonna need that to keep going. But how we use that, there's some room there on how we use that. So we had an idea, again, it's changed a little, my initial thought is a little different. It looks like maybe I could buy a new copier because there's lines in the paper there. That first. So I'll start with the good news, the cost savings. And again, this is all pending my board's approval. This is just an idea.
You get them all.
At the top of the page, I talk about the arts and culture work that we agreed in partnership with the city a few years ago. You can see there in 2022, the current funding structure for that work as it's listed there. With us exceeding the revenue, if we decide to exceed the revenue neutral, we can absorb that 33,562 from the city. And then that work then solely just comes over to Hutchinson. We fund it, we do it, we're not here asking for partial funding for that position. Part of that is that number I've been told will never change. So it's, you know, it's almost, we have a little bit more freedom to, if we absorb that ourselves moving forward. So that would free up $33,000 from the city budget if we did that. When you look at the existing Healthy Neighborhood Initiative funding for 2022, you can see there what I had stated earlier. And then you can show how most of that is being, you know, it's just staffing and benefits that take that up. The draft funding showed a increase both on Hutchrec's part and the city of Hutchinson part. The chamber would stay at the 20, but it would primarily focus on the programming that I show below that. And again, that 80,000 number for the manager, that's high. I figured I'd better start high just to make sure. I wouldn't want you to be surprised. But just using that math, when you look at what the city's funded, the 53,562 this year, changing that around, that's 71.5. That's just a $17,000 increase from what you're funding now. I know that's still an increase, that's still $17,000. But it maybe makes this more reasonable, and if that halftime position's already written into your guys' revenue neutral rate, maybe it isn't even an increase. I don't know how that, or not much, maybe it's even less than an increase. So happy to, if you guys want to check my math, that's been really quick. Putting this together, I had a conversation with Gary Friday, and he told me I had to be at this meeting today, and so I put that together. But that was the initial idea on the neighborhood development, to try to ease the pain on that increase.
so the increase of 17.5 would get us up to, I don't understand how that gets us up to 71.5.
Well, I'm taking the 33 away.
Oh,
He's absorbing the.
Okay,
whole-
but
I'm
there's
taking
still,
the
but
33.
you're still going to have funding for arts and culture.
Yes, we will fund it, yeah, so when you look at Hutch funding right now, under the current structure, we're at 25. We take that 33 and we fund that.
And then do you still have a kind of advisory committee for funding those organizations that
So.
the city used to have?
Yeah, and that is a separate pot of money, so there is what you guys call a cultural activities fund.
Yeah.
And that is funding directly from the city to arts organizations in town. That's, and Paul, feel free to jump in here, you guys have never increased that, so there's pretty much just set amounts that are going to those organizations each year. We, as a staff at Hutch Rec, can definitely facilitate a process for that, but there doesn't need to be a separate board to do
Okay.
that. This last year, we just sent them checks directly. And they actually, those arts organizations prefer that because they don't have to submit all
Yeah.
those applications. They're just give us our percentage and we move forward, so.
Well, I guess my question is, if 17.5 gets us to the salary you need for a full-time position, why would we then combine it? Is that if we didn't want to add 17.5, is that what you're saying?
No, yeah, if you didn't want to add 17.5,
Gotcha. Okay.
and maybe I muddied the waters with that. I was just, when I hear halftime,
Yeah,
that would scare me, being in
Mhm.
charge of that. We have a full-time coordinator. The skill set of that individual is spot on for coordinating work, but not manager work, right? And we're gonna have to pay for that to get the results.
yeah.
You have to pay for that. So, Jay, to your point, yes, 17-ish and change gets you the full-time neighborhood manager.
I feel like that person is going to have so much work with neighborhoods that to add on downtown would be shortchanging both.
Fair, yeah, no, that's fair.
But I don't know how council feels.
Is it gonna be like a working manager?
Oh, yeah, no, they'll be out in the neighborhoods. Yeah, it's not one of those our managers aren't set in the office type managers, they're out, well, heck,
So it's
everybody's
like a
out.
working manager?
I was vacuuming a pool the other day, we all,
Yeah.
we're all hands on deck at Hutch Rec.
Like where they can coordinate too and help with the coordination?
Oh, for sure, yeah, this position would be in charge of the coordinator, and they would work together to do more neighborhoods per year, work hopefully with existing neighborhoods in greater detail than what we're able to now. We're stretched. So, yeah, it would.
It wouldn't be like a manager that's just telling him to go.
No, that isn't. We just need I don't know what organization that works in, but for us, they would have a specific role. The coordinator would do more coordinating work. This one would be more of the public face of the program, in large scale. Grant writing would be part of what they would do. Just a bigger scope than day-to-day of what the coordinator does right now. And I feel like we've been successful with the coordinator to this point. We've heard a lot of good things. We've accomplished a lot with the neighborhood development. But to move forward at the pace that we're being asked to move forward, I've got to have this manager level position to do that. Because right now it's me, and we're moving, but we're not moving near as fast as if we had somebody
Fully dedicated?
fully dedicated to do that, correct? See, Deborah, I gave him money back. See how it works?
Way to flex.
Kind of gave him money back. I gave it back and then I took it back. It was what it is.
Okay, thoughts?
This is that 20,000 that we didn't account for.
17.5.
Yeah, actually, 17,938 is,
Yeah, whatever the math.
Gary, you see, you
Gary's
can
got
always
the
count
math.
on Gary to
You
get
got
the
the
math
math.
right.
63 cents. This is the position that Garza is really pushing for too.
Yeah, and he thought our meeting was at 6:30. He's been texting me. I think he's gonna be down here, but just so you understand his absence was not a lack of interest. You'll find that the budgeting process is really, drinking from a fire hose, and you have to make decisions on things that are, really, really important in a short, like this really condensed time frame. And I know it's nerve wracking, but,
So Angela,
that's what we do.
this 20,000 is not in the budget, or is it?
The
It's not.
17,938.
17,938.
It's- it's not.
Yes,
No.
that amount.
It is not.
Okay.
We have ideas.
Well, I think that probably what you may need to do is to kind of, we probably need to walk through some of it and see if there's, keep that in mind and see, you may not be able to make or you may not want to make a decision right now on that, but, as we go through the budget, see if there's some things you want to
Is
look
there
at.
anything that we budgeted conservatively that we can adjust?
I've tried to be conservative on sales tax. I mean,
Yeah,
we really don't know what's gonna happen, or if we're gonna go into a recession,
yeah.
or if sales tax is still gonna increase.
Well, I think that, we have kind of what we think we're going to end up with. I mean, obviously, you can reduce that. That would be another way of doing it, so. And if you want,
This is a year-over-year expense.
yeah.
That would be what Jade would want to do,
What's that?
reduce that reserve.
No, she's like, no, budget it in so we can see it.
I said I don't mind reducing the reserves, I just don't want a pattern of reducing reserves. Because we did that, and then you get to a point where,
I think it's okay to reduce reserves with like a one-time injection, like the downtown architect. It's not a year-over-year
Yeah.
cost. This is a year-over-year cost. It's something that would probably have to work in. I would like to see it work.
yeah, I like to, yeah. I think, if we approach some of these positions as investments, like, the downtown position, this position, you're looking for a return on them. It's not like we have a bunch of it, they're not just sitting around.
Supposed to be, we can fit it in there if that's what you
It
want to
sounds
do.
to me like we're gonna fit it in there.
All right, let's move forward.
Okay. Jackson, you're up.
Great. I'm gonna get.
Yeah, come on over.
Yes.
I've got like 2 phones, 2 computers,
I think this is the right clicker.
Sorry, Jackson.
It maybe isn't. Ah, excellent, it is. Very good. Okay, thanks, folks. I will be fast. I think I scared Gary with the number of slides that are in here, because he called me about an hour and 45 minutes ago to ask me how long I was gonna take. But you all know mostly what I do. I'm Jackson Swear, Entrepreneur Navigator at Startup Hutch. And we are requesting a $30,000 increase over last year's actuals with a $10,000 increase over last year's request. We'll get to at the end. So first of all, just a reminder, we've got a staff of 2, me and my colleague Dave Dukart. Got this slide in here in part to tell you all, if you didn't catch it earlier, I hadn't seen any of the announcements, Dave is going to retire at the end of the year. Congratulations to Dave. He was the director for a long time. And we had a really good transition. He's going to stay on the staff to the end of the year. We will actually be 3 people for a brief period of 6 months for the rest of 2022. Hiring a replacement for Dave, who's going to train under him for quite a long period. We were able to budget that in this year with a little bit of a hit on our reserves, and I think that's going to be really important to maintaining that continuity for us in the long term. So Startup Hutch, why entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs, they build businesses, they root our wealth here locally by building their wealth here and by keeping it here and by eventually, by creating jobs for local people. That's important, I believe you all know that. So I'm a part of the Reno County Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Partnership, or the RCEP, or the RKEEP. I don't know that we've decided on how to pronounce that. We could probably use a better acronym. There are a lot of partners that are involved in that, including the city of Hutchinson. If you all have any questions about that, let me know. The main thing I wanted to say on this slide is that we have a 5-year action plan, which we are currently in year 3 of. I'm asking for the money for year 4 of the plan. That's just been revised, so just understand that this broad work that Startup Hutch is doing is part of a long-term plan to promote and encourage more entrepreneurship in Reno County. So that was the wrong way. What have we done in the last year? So this is our dashboard. This shows a few things. I want to call your attention to a few numbers here. One is this $475,000 in new growth and investment. Our goal was to loan out $200,000 last year. We crushed that number in large part due to one large project, but we did have a wide variety of different loans, which I'll talk about a few of those highlights in just a minute. But we didn't quite hit our net job creation number based on our survey of our past loan borrowers. However, we did very much exceed our targets for the number of entrepreneurs that we engaged with and the number of people who came to our events. And in fact, you'll see the 69 number here. That's entrepreneurs engaged last year. Our goal was to talk to 50 new people. We talked to 69 new people in our database. That number actually only represents the last half of last year. I got new client tracking software in July. So all of this, money flowing in the system and the economy seeming to be going great and all of the new businesses in downtown is creating a lot of activity for me as well. Here is a few of the loans that we did. We did a few more last year, but I wanted to call attention to these because I think they represent a good spread of the spectrum of different things that we do. So the one on the left, Hutchinson Mental Health, was a new business which is a mental health care facility. Dr. Jared Dector is the owner there. And we were able to leverage some different loan funds that we don't normally get to leverage on that one. That's why I point that one out. We were able to access some funds that are available through the Kansas Community Investment Fund. That's specifically for health-related projects. So one of the things that Startup Hutch is bringing to the community is an awareness of and an ability to help connect entrepreneurs to some of these less commonly accessed loan funds. The project in the middle was the biggest project that we've done, at least in a long time, certainly in my time at Startup Hutch, which was the Hoke Hotel project. We worked with Mark and Phoebe Davenport. That project is notable because of the complicated capital stack that's involved. There's a lot of different loan funds and a lot of other investment involved in that project. And so we worked with them to help them get the capital for that project put together. The one on the right is, that's a revitalization of an existing building in our downtown. The one on the right is a project from out in Bueller. Just a reminder, we're Startup Hutch, but we do represent and work with the whole county. And this was a business transition project. So this was an existing business called Stuckey Wood Products that was purchased by Andrew Penrose and renamed to Jack's for All Trades. It's a great business. It's it's a supply stop. It's kind of like an old-fashioned general store, really, there in Bueller, and they are doing really well. We also hosted several events and meetups, including the Hot Seat virtually and our Entrepreneurship Connections events. We had a lot of people come. I'm not going to say any more about that. We also have a great online community that we built over the course of the past few years since we did the rebranding. I've got over 1,000 followers on Facebook and over 250 members of our private Facebook group. So that's one of the main ways that people are hearing about us. So if you're listening and you're interested in entrepreneurship, go follow us on Facebook. And for the city council members, if you're not following us on Facebook already or signed up for our newsletter, you can go to our website and hit the subscribe button, and then you can learn all about what we have. Can you tell that I feel like a YouTube personality sometimes, guys? It's like, all right, like, follow, subscribe. Okay, we also do this great thing called the Youth Entrepreneurship Challenge. So engaging our youth is one of our primary goals. And so every year we do this annual event. It's in partnership with Network Kansas, and the winners of our competition regionally get to go to a state level competition. This year, I'm pleased to share with you that the first place winning team, the Sweet Treat from Hutchinson High School, did place in the first category in the state as well. So they don't have like an overall winner, they do them in tiers. But they got the top level award, which we're very proud of them for their accomplishment. Dalton Estes, who was on the winning team this year, was also on the winning team last year. He's one to look out for. I hope he comes back and starts a great business in Hutch after he gets done with his post-high school career. We also hosted a business transition panel last year. Business transitions and helping people to sell their business and buy existing businesses is an important part of our work, but I won't spend much more time talking about that because I know we're crunched on time. And we hosted some workshops, like how to think like an entrepreneur and some destination boot camp revamps. We're going to continue to do more of that. These are all usually in partnership with Network Kansas. And I have said their name a few times, but I'm just going to remind all of you, they're a statewide partner that we have. That's the Kansas Center for Entrepreneurship. And so they provide some of our loan funds that we can give out, and they also provide us a little bit of funding for some programs just like this. We also did a cool thing last year called the Double Dare Challenge, where we asked businesses to tell us that if they had doubled in size since 2019. We picked the 2019 because we wanted to take the 2020 year out of the mix for reasons I'm sure you can imagine. But we had 15 Reno County businesses who told us about their adding jobs. And that might have been going from 1 to 2 or from 30 to 100. It didn't matter which. And we were able to identify 15 of those businesses creating 180 jobs over that period. So that's just some proof positive for you that our local businesses and our entrepreneurs are creating a lot of jobs here in Reno County. What do we have coming up this year? We just wrapped up Entrepreneur Business Basics with your own Dave Sotelo from the city facilitating that class. That was designed for underrepresented entrepreneurs. It was a really good class, very proud of all of our participants. They had a pitch competition at the end of that where we gave the winner $1,000 to help them with their entrepreneurial journey. And it was really cool to see several people who came into that room who didn't really know anything about starting a business before they started, walk away with a business plan that they started on, that they developed, and the ability to go talk to somebody about what their plans were and try to get funding to make their dreams a reality. We're also about to launch a Project Connected. This is a partnership with the Foxtrot Studio and Hutch Rec. These are some marketing workshops that we've got going on. So if you are a small business owner and you need help with your marketing, we're going to help with that. This is one of our most requested asks, is for help with marketing our business. So we're going to try to provide some content programming for that. And there will be even more, including some workshops on building wealth in your business and how to buy a business, and still more yet to come. As I remind you all of life is an experiment, and the more experiments you make, the better. This is a slide that goes in every single one of my presentations as I remind all of us that what we are doing here and all of entrepreneurship involves a lot of experimentation. We like to try new things. If they work, we keep them. If they don't, we let them go. This is the money part. We have a 5-year commitment from the Hutchinson Community Foundation to provide $90,000 a year in grant funding to us. That will end at the end of 2024. Reno County, you can see, has bumped up their funding in the first year of the plan, and we ratcheted them down a little bit to 2022. The goal was for this year, 2022, that was last year's request, was to get the city and the county at the same level of funding at $70,000. The city came through in 2022 with $50,000. We're staying on that goal of trying to get the county and the city to equalize the funding at $90,000 a year in 2024. That's an important part of our long-term strategy because we cannot continue to rely on the grant funding that we have from the Community Foundation. So we need to ramp up our funding from our public partners so that we can decrease our reliance on our philanthropic partners. This is a breakdown of the budget. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I budgeted to spend quite a lot on marketing and programming for 2023. I have given myself a little bit of room in those categories if I need it. And if we get all of the funding that we requested from the city and the county, we will have a really good year with lots of really exciting things going on. Questions? Also, here's my contact info.
Questions from the council?
And we were able to budget this in.
It's included, it's embedded in the current budget.
What is your budget? How many FTEs do you have in your budget?
Next year, we budgeted for 2 FTEs. So this year, we had 2.5. And we budgeted approximately $12,000 to $15,000 overage this year. But we had reserves from 2020. We actually retained a lot of reserves in 2020 due to being very conservative on spending and also not hiring for the position that I am currently in until 4 months into the year, which saved the organization some money.
It's the,
But that was correcting a significant problem that the organization had before I got there, where it did not have sufficient
Can you go back
reserves.
a slide?
has the
or two?
county already, are they doing 80?
That one.
This one?
Has the county committed to the 80 already?
The county, just like the city, has not finalized their budget. I do not think either one of you will have the benefit of knowing what the other one decides to do for sure before you have to make a decision.
Maybe we should stick it at 70 for now. It'd still be a $20,000.
Jackson, I had a question about one of the slides where you talk about wages of jobs created, and all of them are like less than $15 an hour, so.
Yes, that's correct. So one of the questions that we ask our current borrowers is, of the new jobs that they have created on this, oh my goodness, it's a long ways back, there it is, the slide. Is how many of those jobs were over $15 an hour. So the goal is that about half of the jobs that are created are over $15 an hour. That wasn't very high this year. That is the case for some reasons which are specific to the businesses that we surveyed, which means I cannot tell you. Because one of the things that we promised the businesses is that we will only give the results of that in the aggregate. So I could explain to you why that is, but I cannot actually, for privacy reasons.
I guess my concern is that we invest in programs that increase our median wage because we're about $10,000 less than the state. I know that entrepreneurship is inherently risky and there's a lot of, like you said, experimentation, so maybe those wages are low at the beginning, but yeah, it's just a general point of contention with where our economic development money goes. I want to make sure we're investing in programs that are creating jobs that enable people to put money back into the community. And I don't know what can be done to help with that, if you have any thoughts there.
Well, just a couple things. One thing I would say is I share that general philosophy that we want to be creating jobs that are high quality jobs for our community. And that's why, in fact, that's why we have this data on the dashboard. But, you know, one of the unfortunate things about putting together a dashboard is that then you commit to providing numbers to people, and then even when the numbers are what you want, you still have to give them to them. So eight is not the number that we want to have there. We would like it if it were at least half, right? So a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that we know that a lot of small business owners have struggled in the recent environment to keep up with raising wages compared to some of the other larger businesses because they're not able to absorb some of the costs associated with that with economies of scale. And so some of the jobs that have been being added back in the last year in sectors that have been adding jobs in, say, retail, for example, are not always the highest wage jobs. But the other thing to keep in mind about entrepreneurship and small business development is that even when the jobs that are being created aren't really high wage, the wealth, the net earnings from that company are funneling back to a local owner who is going to take that money and continue to reinvest it locally.
That's a good point.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd rather a corner coffee shop paid lower wages than the big box store. I think our community is better off with one of those jobs than the other.
The other data point we're missing here is how many of these businesses are catering to bringing dollars into our city rather than just spending the same dollars within our community. Like machine design services, okay, they might be catering to their customer might be in town, but their customer may sell worldwide.
Yeah.
So we're developing ways to create more dollars coming into our community, which I think that's an important data. It's not up here, but I think that's an important thing to try to.
Yeah, but I know also if we go into recession or interest rates are really high, the movement on new entrepreneurship would probably slow down. I don't know, I think maybe we should do it, we went from 30 to 50, so why don't we just keep, maybe go to 60?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm open to suggestions. I think we need to be supporting entrepreneurship. I'm just not sure what level makes sense with the current environment. I think actually recessions provide a better opportunity for entrepreneurship because
sometimes.
when
Yeah,
people lose
I'm gonna jump in there with
Yeah.
a comment, actually. I think that the rising interest rate environment and the challenges for entrepreneurs is going to increase pressure on
Yeah.
us to provide lower interest loans to make projects possible. And actually, the last year hasn't been very good for me in terms of giving out loans, because the banks have been able to deploy the capital into the system that's needed. As interest rates rise and it's harder for the banks to deploy the money into business, it's gonna be more important that we have resources like Startup Hutch. And there will be, we can't make too many formal announcements about them because the statewide programs haven't been developed yet, but we're looking at, I mean, a lot of money in statewide loan funds becoming available. Since I think that's how some of the state COVID dollars are gonna be deployed into the economy.
I say we, I don't know, I'm just gonna throw a number out there, 65 instead of 80 for this year. And if you do really good, then maybe we'll do the 90K next year.
Jackson, what happens after 2024?
After 2024, the community foundation's money goes away, and I try to figure out how to replace some of it, but not all of it, and rely on the city and the county to meet my baseline staffing needs.
Okay, fair.
If I might offer a countering recommendation, you might consider funding me at 70 this year. Give yourself a little bit of slack to fund some of the other proposals that you've heard today. I do want to echo what Deborah said at the end of her presentation as well. I'm sure Tony would agree with me. We all need each other, the three of us in this room and more that work on economic development. It doesn't work if we only do one part of this piece. If we don't have a community that people who will start businesses want to live in, where we have amenities, where we have things that Hutch Rec provides, and the sorts of opportunities and other businesses and things that Deborah can bring in, then entrepreneurs won't want to live here. That you can go around the circle on all that. We all need each other and what we do in order to have what we do.
I suppose the goal is 90 in 2024. I mean, if you have the 30 and then the 20,000 increase, which would be 50, and then 70, which would be 20,000 increase, and then 2024 would be another 20,000 increase. Maybe, I mean, does anybody else feel that just
I think 70 is fair.
70?
Yeah, I'm okay with 70.
Okay, I'm okay with 70.
I appreciate it.
So then if that'll only leave us 7,500 to find for Hutch Rec, is that right? We're getting there.
Yes, we're at 7,938.
Baby steps.
And 60
All right.
I feel like it's an
Tony, I got
option.
you more than halfway there already.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And the hope is the county would pick up our slack.
Well, they've been picking up our slack
they've
for
been
4
picking up our
years,
slack.
so I doubt that's gonna happen.
What will happen in practice, Greg, is I will have a little bit less money to play with as I budget for next year with my board in terms of what we can do. We can make that work.
Okay.
I will be honest with you about what I can make work, and if you all propose something that I can't make work in a future year, I will be honest about that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you all for joining. What am I looking at here? We've got a lot more to cover. I think the next thing we probably want to discuss are the additional staff positions that were baked in. They are already baked into the budget. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute break before launching into that? No?
No.
Okay, let's do it.
What are our roads being funded at?
Oh boy, and I do not want that to be the slide that's on there.
Yeah.
We can talk a little bit about that. I think that you have a list of the
I'm going the wrong way, aren't I?
positions. If you go to page 10 of your Angela put together.
Right now.
And I think one of them that maybe, I don't know how you've done it in the past, Justin, you're asking for an additional person, so do you want to talk about that position?
Yeah, so I did ask for an additional zookeeper in this budget. Some primary reasons, overtime, and to reduce our overtime and our seasonal use, our seasonal salaries by about $7,000. And really, I know how the study came out, so I want to go back to the staffing study a little bit, which recommended 4. All right, 4 is a little extreme, I felt like, but it did really point out how stressed out our keepers are, and how hard they push every day to cover their areas. We have 5 keepers right now, and obviously we're a 7-day-a-week operation. And so only 2 days out of the week do we actually have all 5 staff, all 5 keepers there because of the way their days off fall. So on those other 4 days of the week, then we have keepers that are chipping in to help in other areas. So adding this other keeper really just ensures that all the animals are getting cared for like they should be. It gives us an extra opportunity to do things like better engagement with guests. One of the kind of highlights that a guest has when it comes to the zoo is the opportunity to talk to a zookeeper. Right now we are so stretched thin that it's hard to actually have a keeper and have that conversation about, hey, what's the name of the otter, or what's the name of whatever animal, and where can I find that animal, those sorts of things. So we'll definitely improve, the guest experience. The other thing we struggle with is staff time off. So if we have a planned vacation, if we have somebody who's sick, that really throws a huge wrinkle into our daily operation, because we can't just not care for a section of animals for a day because a zookeeper is sick that day. And so this would just give us a little bit more flexibility to kind of make sure that we're meeting those minimum standards. And then the last thing is that would help us a little bit with some of the general maintenance. When we do have our full keeper staff, those couple days a week, we are able to tackle a couple smaller projects, things that probably don't require park maintenance staff to come over and do, but something that our zookeepers can do kind of inside an exhibit. As challenging as it is to hire people right now, I really worry about, especially at the zoo, if we lose a keeper or 2 keepers because of the stress level they're under right now. Trying to fill those is going to be extremely difficult. So like I said, the study, when it kind of broke down all the number of hours and recommended 4 people. But I think that's a little excessive. So I think 1 puts us in a much better position. It's still not ideal. 2 is probably ideal according to staff. That's even 1's a big ask. I get it, but the zoo is in every study we do, it's one of the most popular amenities we have in our community. So I think this just continues to support that. So.
Thoughts? And as a reminder, these positions have been included in the budget as it stands, so it's
You know
really
what
just.
I think, so I'm
Yeah.
just stay out of the, I'm just staying out of the
We did
discussion, yeah.
include, and I believe Angela included, I reduced the seasonal and the overtime by, I want to say $7,000. So, I mean, it's not 100%, difference, so it does reduce that burden a little bit. So.
I mean, I get the logic of having someone on staff to cover, having enough people to cover one report. I would imagine a zookeeper is not a position you can shift someone over from a different department to cover for a week or 2.
No.
Just in general, as a general thought, adding more full-time employees when our city has shrunken, gotten smaller, even though our infrastructure hasn't gotten smaller, is something that's going to be an argument that's brought up quite a bit.
I'm really curious how we are adding these. Like what went away? I see that there's a -1 on there's -3 on horticulture, but there's +3 on maintenance. So is it?
Well, okay,
Yeah,
so that Horton Forestry is just moving positions.
Oh, okay.
So it's just reclassifying. Same with inspections.
Okay.
There's a pay grade difference, but I believe that's already implemented. And then like in police, you'll see where there's moving a lieutenant to a police officer. So I wanted to be transparent about those changes in position,
Yeah.
but they're not affecting the full FTE count.
But we still have a +3 at the end of it.
Yes.
So how did we
A
achieve
zookeeper-
revenue neutral? Like where did we cut? I guess we probably cut from a lot of places, but.
Right, I mean, overall though, our expenditures are going up from last year. But one of the things that's changing is we didn't see the decrease to sales tax that we thought we would.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So, like, we've accounted for that in 22 and revised the sales tax figure. So that plays into it a lot as well.
Are we accounting for a lower sales tax figure in this budget?
We're projecting a 3% increase, which is pretty typical with trends. Right now, year-to-date for 22, we're higher than that 3%, but, so we're trying to balance it to be what we think is actually realistic.
In regards to property tax, if I remember correctly, it's kind of, the appraisal's done like on a 3-year average. It's not just, okay, last month housing went up, so we're just gonna automatically raise the property value.
No, what they do is by law, they need to look at each property at least every 7 years. They do it a lot more often than that. In fact, they do it on a pretty much a yearly basis, but it's a mass appraisal. And so I haven't talked to the appraiser, this year as to where they're at, or how many people are protesting, the amounts, but that's, what does happen is every year they do try to get around and take a look at, I say look, they're looking on a computer, they don't go out and physically look at each one. They do try to get out every so often, and whether it's every 3 or 5 years, as you're talking about, maybe try to do a more, in-person inspection of it, but they do look at it every year on
Isn't it
computer.
based off of market value, and it can't be more than 10% over?
Well, no,
It has to be like a certain range to market value?
what they do is they, if you pull up your property, they have a comparison, and they have several homes that are comparable, and they look at those kinds of things to come up with the amount. And obviously, when prices of housing is selling high, your house is probably going to go up some just because comparables are going up. And but they do look at it pretty much every year.
Well, back to the zoo, Justin, the rehabilitation center, and I'm looking at benchmarking from our study. We're like the only one that has this rehabilitation center. How much, is that tying up a full-time person, or?
It is not. We have a year-round variable hour staff, so they average about 30 hours a week or less than 30 hours a week that does that. We do have staff from the zoo side that does come over and supplement from time to time, but it's primarily done with that one variable hour employee.
Do you feel like that's a critical thing for our zoo?
Um,
I'm trying to figure this benchmarking out,
Yeah.
and it's all over the map, and I don't think you're out of line, but that is an anomaly that
Yeah.
it seems like we have this rehabilitation center that nobody else does.
It is very unique, for sure. Every zoo that's AZA accredited, which we are, they have a standard of conservation. So they have to do some sort of conservation effort in order to keep that status. And that's how we use our conversation dollars, is in the rehab center. So other zoos may do projects that do, streamline and restoration, and they do, tall grass prairie work or something. Ours goes into that rehabilitation. So it is a valuable service for those that use it. And now to put a dollar number on that, I mean, that's obviously, based on whoever's opinion. But we get lots and lots of animals that come in. There's really no place to take them. If it goes away, I think that's something we're going to hear about for sure, if that gets decreased in size. We have over the years been much more selective on what animals we actually invest into, meaning that if it's a valuable species, so if it's not just a sparrow or something like that, if it's something that we need that's valuable, to put the time and effort into it. So we have tried to make the operation more efficient, more meaningful from a conservation standpoint as well. So, the comparables are so tough because zoos are so unique from one mission to the other's mission. When you compare numbers of animals, the difference between taking care of a medium-sized cat is a whole lot different than some small little we
Well,
got time.
and that's something I mentioned before, the amount we're spending per animal seems to be a little bit high.
Yeah, if you throw Sedgwick County in there, they've got elephants, so you know, their number's gonna look way,
Yeah.
way off, so, yeah, it's not a great way to compare the zoos there, but I think the meaningful thing out of the study was when they sat down with the staff, like, okay, what does your day look like? How many hours do you really need to do your job and do your job well? And that's how they came up with 4 additional.
Well, yeah, and believe me, I noticed they want 4 and you're asking for 1, so.
Trying to, yeah. I could have asked for 4 and went back to 1.
And believe me, I know nothing about, I know nothing about running a zoo, so, but we have a great zoo, and I don't know going forward, we've had this discussion about, do we keep it free, do we ask for donations? I hope that we figured that out.
Downgrade it from a zoo, make it something else. When it costs so much that. An otter educational park. Get rid of a lot of the animals, keep these otters, have interactive stuff, kind of like the new park that you just put in. You can have stuff like that has educational information, it's like billboards, like sound effects and buttons, and maybe we don't have so much staff or like live animals, but like more of like so we can reduce costs from almost $1 million a year that it's gonna be within a few years.
And we are very, very, to your point, we are very aware of when we do additions to the zoo to not add workload onto our zookeeper staff because of this situation. So all the recent developments we've done have not added work for our zookeeper staff. So
Just saying, could downgrade it from a zoo, make it otter educational park, and get rid of some of the animals and staff, and have something fun that we can still do the lights for Christmas, and we can still do all the events that are fun there, and still do birthday parties, it just won't cost so much in overhead costs. And you can have like really cool TVs and things inside the buildings for the kids to play interactively with that like taught them about animals. Because we have like really good zoo footage and footage on stuff out in the wild, living in the wild, that won't cost too much overhead, that could be educational, and we could still provide the fun services that the zoo currently provides at a much less overhead cost.
Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just shared some of
So
them.
do you want to go yes on the
I
position?
would be fine with 1 since they recommended 4. I just want to be sure that we're kind of like downtown. We want a plan on what the zoo needs to look like and how much it's going to cost 5 years from now. And,
Over $1 million
and
a year within the next 2 to 3 years at the
Okay.
current rate.
And I think there's some opportunity here to have a partnership with USD 308 with some of the teaching.
Because we're at about 850 something.
They have some money to spend on some programs and possibly, I think that would be a good fit.
we do have in the budget strategic plan. Is it still, I think that's one we left, to try to work towards that.
We
A
met a few weeks
strategic
ago.
plan to change it to not a zoo, an educational park.
It's still in there.
But to get that question about what does the future of the zoo look like? We do have that budgeted for next year, so in the 2023 budget, to answer some of those questions. Because the last strategic plan we had, we've already kind of diverted from that, and it was more of growth oriented. It was more, you need to add otters, and then after you add otters, you need to add wolves, and then you need to add, whatever. This would not be that. It's more answering some of those questions about, do we stay a free zoo? Do we charge? What does the growth look like? Do we grow? Those sorts of things. What other partners are out there? There's a huge education piece that's coming into play as far as offering some of those additional education opportunities. So,
I'm just saying, I think we should really think about it. Maybe we get some grants, funds to transform it into an educational park and not a zoo. But it has like a lot of zoo things to it, but you won't have to have the overhead of the staff and taking care of the animals, like deer and a beaver.
I'm in favor of keeping it in. What are your thoughts, John?
Because what are we at now? We're like, are we, with this, how much is it a year for the extra position?
Zookeeper's a pretty low grade.
Yeah, they don't do it for the money.
No.
And they're all college educated too. They all
Yeah.
have bachelor's degrees.
4 days plus the benefits.
So we're creeping up to $900,000 a year.
So, yeah, it's already included.
Yeah, it's,
in this
we're
year.
at
Yeah, what is it?
883.
We're at 883.
Yeah, I believe
So I
so.
didn't even look at it, and I was only off. That's how much time I know how much expensive it is.
Yeah,
I was only
you're okay with
off
keeping it
by-
in? Okay. So now we need to talk about,
You know my position.
changes in HPD staffing levels. So I think that's you.
So
Chief.
one of the things that we were striving for, I wanted to do it when I first got here, but is accreditation, because I want to bring our agency up to best practices in the field. I think with the liability and with what we're dealing with in law enforcement these days. And so we're looking at national accreditation was one of the things I wanted to achieve when I first got here, but that is relatively cost prohibitive. It's about $10,000 a year before you add any staffing or personnel to that with the mandatory software they have. But the state is rolling out state accreditation, which is basically going to be free, or at maximum, they're saying maybe $500 a year. But with that, we had to have the personnel to do that with a accreditation manager. Kind of accompanying that with the other issues that we had was there's a lot of administrative duties that I have on my operational lieutenants, and I needed to pull that off so that they could be more effective on the street with our officers. And then we have not done well with locating and applying for grants for law enforcement, and more grants are coming out with the ARPA funding and the COVID type issues because we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do that. And so that position would kind of encompass all of that and take on those skills and abilities within the agency. And I didn't want to ask for an additional cost for the agency to bring on an accreditation manager. So I reduced my high-paying job as an administrative lieutenant and took that position away, changed that to an officer position, which allows me to put an extra detective in special operations to start. If you guys are paying attention with our prostitution and our child trafficking that we were able to work on this last year, we had sexual exploitation of a child or predator seeking our children out in such large numbers that we weren't able to work all those cases because I just didn't have enough detectives back there. So that reducing that lieutenant to an officer position, putting him in that position to help attack that child predator issue, and then adding that civilian accreditation manager is relatively cost neutral, taking a high paying job and creating 2 lower paying jobs out of that. So I wanted that to be relatively cost neutral. Proposed that to Mr. Cantrell earlier in the year that we already went into effect with that. We've already hired that accreditation manager position and reduced that lieutenant down to an officer for this year because it was relatively cost neutral. The other additional position just came up within the last 3 weeks. I hadn't intended upon asking for an extra SRO position, but Dr. Don Johnson, the new superintendent for 308, approached me a few weeks ago. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and she is looking at wanting to add a second SRO to USD 308. This was kind of looked at a couple years ago in looking at having a second SRO split positions between the 2 middle schools. The way Dr. Johnson would intend to kind of have us use that position would be that this person would cover the 2 middle schools, but also be in each one of the other grade schools on a weekly basis to kind of cover any of those security or calls in those various schools. Our intent with her is she's intending to go to her board to see if she could seek funding for half of that position. So we would be funding the other half of that SRO position. And with my accreditations manager / grant writer and with her school staff, we're going to look at applying for grants to hopefully fully fund that position, which would take the city and the school board off the hook for those potential funds. But we won't know that until later in the year, and we kind of desire to start that SRO at the start of this upcoming school year. I think that we would be naive to think that an active violence situation couldn't happen here. It's kind of a matter of, not really a matter of if, but when. That threat that we got a citizen tip on just a couple weeks ago, that we were able to arrest the individual. Part of that threat was to USD 30, to the middle school at HMS 8. And so there's a lot of those threats that we get on an annual basis throughout the school year. Kids post on social media they're going to bring a gun to school, or they have a list of kids that they're going to kill, or things like that. We track each one of those down and take them very seriously. And lots of times they don't amount to a whole lot. Maybe a kid in the heat of anger posts something out on social media, but that threat that we had a couple weeks ago was a legitimate threat. There was going to be active violence in our community, and thank goodness for the citizens that came forward and we were able to head that off. And so I know that's additional funding in the budget, but I don't know of any more precious resource that we have in our community than our kids, and that's where that position would go. And we are, just like everybody else, struggling with staffing and filling positions. So that was one of the conversations that Dr. Johnson and I had. How would we actually fill that position? But we have a individual who is a former HPD police officer who's an SRO and was the SRO over at Nickerson School District under Dr. Don Johnson, and he wants to come over to USD 308. So we would be able to fill that position if it was approved in the budget.
Chief, can you tell me a little bit about the philosophy of those SROs? Do they patrol, would they be patrolling in the middle schools in full gear? Are they more like plainclothes, community policing, building relationships?
The latter, the SRO that is at the high school, not only they're a soft uniform, so they wear like khakis and a polo. They do have obviously equipment, but they do more than just patrol the schools. Obviously, they take calls for service, and especially at the high school, my SRO resigned from the high school to take a civilian job earlier in the year, and I had to replace him. And there was about a 2-week gap in there until I could replace him with a new SRO. And I had officers up there almost every day, all day, at the high school, because there's fights and there's disturbances, and so the high school really demands a position up there. But in addition to those type of law enforcement related activities, they also do educational pieces in the classrooms and talk to kids about safety and talk to kids about social media safety and things like that. And so we're doing it at the high school, and when Dr. Johnson and I spoke, that's the intent, that the middle schools of this SRO, since we don't have as many calls for service there that are law enforcement related, it's more for that safety in the schools and that educational piece and connecting with the kids and working with them and kind of building that type of relationship. So it's more of a community-oriented, community engagement type piece than I mean, we're not going to be enforcing laws in the middle schools and the grade schools like that. And so that's really what it's designed for.
Well, Chief, I had a question. You eliminated a $74,000 a year job, and we're adding a $56,000 a year job. And I don't know what this police accreditation manager makes, but I don't think it's a wash. I don't think that's fair.
It's not.
To portray it as close to being a wash.
Well, and I don't know what the actual numbers are. When I had pitched that to Mr. Cantrell, the idea was to try to get it to as close to budget neutral as possible. I agree that it's not going to be budget neutral, but I didn't actually figure the numbers out.
I think, Councilman, I think you're looking at about a $25,000 difference is what it is.
Net gain.
Yes.
Without the other SRO, but that's going to be paid for, I assume.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I would assume that the school board is probably going to come up with half of that, so that would be half on us.
Yeah.
If we don't get any grants.
They
That's the
typically
way
have.
it's shown in the
Yeah.
budget, is that
Yeah.
they would reimburse us half.
And of course, if the school board doesn't come up with the funding, then we would have to look at either funding the whole position or not funding it at all and not having it. But if the school board says we don't want the second SRO, then we wouldn't fund our half either, so.
And tell me more about this police accreditation manager. I guess it's already been hired, so.
Yeah.
So I guess don't necessarily need to know about it, but is it just another managerial type. What do most police departments our size, again, let's go back to benchmarking.
Yes.
Do they have this? Is this what they're striving for? Or would we do that anyway without this person?
No, most agencies our size have that or are striving for it, and while it's not, and now at the state level, while it's not gonna be required, it's gonna be highly encouraged, and I can guarantee you that every city of the first class and most second-class cities and stuff are going to be striving for state accreditation. It's already rolled out through the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police and the Sheriff's Association, and they're anticipating as many as 60 to 75% of the agencies in the state will work towards state accreditation. And for cities of the first class or larger cities, even second-class cities, you have to have a designated accreditation manager, and so you're going to see almost all agencies adding that in to achieve that. To bring up, the idea is that we're bringing up the standard of law enforcement and the accountability for law enforcement in the state of Kansas. So we were one of only 12 states in the nation that did not have state accreditation, and so Kansas is rolling that out this year. It's supposed to, it's already in the works, and it's supposed to go live in either around August or September 1 of this year. So we're already working towards that.
About how many FTEs are you trying to hire for right now?
How many officers?
Yeah,
7.
7.
Man, I'm really hesitant to add another position just because we have a person we want to, put in that position. When I'd rather see people on the street where I feel like we need them more than around our kids. But, I'm fine if, it's not the hill I'm going to die on, if the council feels passionately about it. I want to support the school district, obviously. I do feel like there's a role for our officers to play anyway in dropping by schools and having those, connections. I know that's not a
Our
full-time
kids are
presence.
fighting a lot lately.
And I will tell you this, one of my
My daughter's at HMS 8.
mandates, oh,
A
sorry.
Snapchat video of kids fighting with other kids, like almost daily. And they pass it around now, and they're like, and the whole Snapchat thing and kids, and it's getting pretty bad.
One of my mandates pre-COVID and now hopefully post-COVID is that we have a police officer in every school in our community, a minimum of 1 time a week and hopefully more. And that's walking the halls, that's getting in the classroom, talking to kids, that's having lunch with the kids, that's playing with them on the playgrounds. And so those are your beat officers that are getting out in the schools. And so if the SRO position is not approved, there will be officers in the schools, every school, all year long. Now, the difference from what the mayor indicated, those are going to be uniformed police officers that are just coming off the street, coming off a call, going into the schools, talking to kids, as opposed to a dedicated officer who's designed to engage with the kids and teach them safety classes and things of that nature. So
That makes sense.
that's what we'll be.
So you're 7 officers down?
Yes, as we sit right now.
That's better than before.
Yes, we were, we were only down 4 prior to the COVID and the.
I thought we
and
were
the-
averaging 10 or 14.
Well, we were. This was
Okay.
way before any of that happened, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then we got down about 14,
Mhm.
15s, and then we're averaging about 12, and where I sit right now is, as of today, is 7.
Well, I share your concern with staffing. We're gonna add another position. I guess I maybe feel a little differently if we have somebody that, I know who this guy is, and he's been there a long time, and if he wants to plug into HPD, that makes it a little easier. And-
Well, that was a conversation Dr. Johnson and I had. If we added the position and I couldn't staff it, that doesn't do anybody any good. But we happen to have an individual that wants to staff that position, and I think he would
writing
be
grants.
long-term. I'm sorry?
No, that's the accreditation.
That's the credit.
Yeah. So,
So you have the accreditation manager and then the 2 police officers, and one of the police officers being the SOS?
well, we took away a lieutenant and change that into 2 positions with the civilian accreditation manager and the police officer. And then that was already implemented, we already
Yeah.
did that, but the new ask would be the SRO.
Oh, there's also another
+2.
Yeah, it's a +2.
It's a,
one. Okay.
yeah,
And one of them's already been,
yeah, one of them's already kind of been done,
Yeah, kind of +1.5 when it comes to
Yeah.
funding.
yeah.
I'm good with it.
John and Steve?
Well, I'm just kidding, and I apologize for my late, I had a problem with the president, not me problem.
Yeah. Sure, Steve, yeah.
So, kind of real quick here, we're adding more police officers to the budget, or is in the
The
budget?
proposal is to add 1 SRO, school resource officer, that could split time between the middle schools. And it has been baked into the information that was given to us, so it's not like it's not already factored in, but it's just a conversation of whether we want another FTE on our rolls, another full-time person.
How much is that? Is it raising the budget's the same, or?
well, it would be probably a $56,000 position.
Hmm.
And we would look at funding half of that, because the school district is looking at funding the other half. And we'll seek grants to try to cover the half too, but that's not obviously guaranteed. Right.
Could we make it contingent upon
The school
school
district?
board, school district funding? I don't know.
I would do that and continue on the school board.
50%.
Mhm.
I guess my bigger picture here is, what is really important to HPD? What do we want to focus on? You know, I mean, we have 3 dogs that I know were given to us, but with those comes a cost.
There's no cost for that program at all. That cost has not been funded by taxpayer dollars, not 1 penny. We've had a donation of $285,000 for that program and a commitment to continue to fund that program. So that's been at no cost to the city.
Okay, well, I stand corrected, but it just seems like we have a lot going on. It just seems like it gets, and boy, public safety is important, I realize that.
Well, my focus is on, we have our 2 driving principles on community engagement and intelligence-led policing strategy. And so there's only 2 things that I rate the effectiveness of our department off of, and that is our community trust and how are we engaging with our community. And I am not a enforcement-oriented law enforcement agency. I am a service-oriented law enforcement agency, and so the only individual stat that I track for our officers are the number of positive self-initiated community engagements, because those also lead to intelligence, but more so it really connects with our community and we solve community problems, as opposed to, you can't arrest yourself out of a high crime rate. You can't change your community by strong-armed enforcement. You do that by engaging with your community and solving community problems. And the only other stat that I focus on is our crime rate, because that's a determination of how successful we're being. It's not the police activity, but it's our crime rate. And you say that the department has grown, we haven't grown in staffing until we're looking at a couple officers. Now we haven't grown in staffing, but we've grown in scope of what we do at the agency with the same amount of personnel that was given to the agency before. And when I got here, Hutchinson had the 5th highest crime rate in the state of Kansas. It was almost double what the state average crime rate was at 54.9. We were only behind Wichita, Topeka, Kansas City, Kansas, and Merriam, Kansas. All our peer cities, Manhattan, Salina, McPherson, all those cities were way lower than us. And since we implemented these strategies and the things that you indicated, like our special ops unit, our K-9 unit, we've lowered crime in Hutchinson by 50%. And now we're a top 10 city. Our crime rate as we sit right now per capita is 28.7. So we went from 54.7, so that means for every 1,000 residents, 54.7 of them would be a victim of a major Part 1 crime in this community before I got here. Now it's 28.7. And so it's almost a 50% reduction in total crime. That's what's important to us, the community engagement piece and making sure that our citizens are safe and not a victim of crime. And I think that what we've done inside the agency over, because we've had 3.5 years now of a pattern of that, it's proven to be successful. Those two driving principles, community engagement, and intelligence-led policing, is what we do. And if there's a proposal inside the agency that they want to do X or they want to do Y inside the agency, I said, does it match community engagement and make us better in that area, or does it lower our crime rate? Because that's what we do here. And if it doesn't, then we don't implement it.
I've got a question. How much of a pinch would it put you in regards to police officers if this took up one of the 7 empty spots that we're trying
The
to?
way, and I certainly understand what you're saying. If that was the case, we would make that work. And we've been functioning without those positions now, but it's kind of like Justin's talking about at the zoo. We're doing that with overtime, and our guys working those extra hours. And when we do special operations, or we do a saturation patrol, we get out and do community engagements in a particular area to lower crime rate in a high crime area and connecting with those community members, we're kind of having to do a lot of that on overtime now to accomplish that reduction in crime rate. With the 7 officers, if we filled that position, we wouldn't have to do it on overtime. All those officers have a designated role. We're just having to fill that role with overtime.
The next question is, what does the officer typically do when school's not in session?
Yeah, right now our school resource officer, we moved him into investigations to help with the backlog of case investigation. And so that's what he's doing currently while school's not in session.
So there's somewhere where this person could also,
I'm sorry.
this person would also be able to transition into another role during those 3 months?
Yes, we'd keep him employed for those 3 months. And so we could do several things with him. If, like the backlog and investigations, we can move him in there. We can move him into what I would see out of this individual, because if I knew who it is that I would probably move him into a full-time community engagement officer for the 3 months out of the summer and have them go to the neighborhood meetings and have them do those type of things and up our community engagement during those summer months. Because I think that's his skill set as well.
Chief, do not misunderstand. I think it is working. We're talking about something just this week, and it's all about community engagement.
100%.
And I guess if we play this out, crime going down, do we need as many officers? Again, I think the answer probably is we still need the same amount of officers to keep it down. But it does beg those questions, you know, if we're not dealing with as much crime.
Well, I do think you do have the opportunity to be a little more proactive.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I read about another pedophile every day that you guys have tricked into.
Right.
Like, you know, and that's on the proactive side.
Right, and I'll tell you that
No,
I'll
it's
give you-
not like there's not enforcing anything, don't.
Yeah.
Right.
He makes it sound like there's not enforcing, there's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on.
And I'll tell you this, if you look at the state average per capita, officer for every 1,000 residents, we're supposed to have right around 100 officers. I have an authorized strength right now of 77. And so we're doing more with less anyway. And you're right, crime has been driven down, but our calls for service, our calls have not gone down because we've taken what we were doing responding to crimes and we put in that community engagement piece. So officers are spending their time engaging with the community, using that to reduce crime as opposed to responding to past crime and never having any type of effect. So we're putting the work in on the front end as opposed to having to put the work in on the back end. And we're still having to commit overtime hours to accomplish the mission that we have. So I know it's easy to say, well, you reduce crime, so can we reduce the number of officers? But the reason we're reducing crime is because we're using the number of officers we have to drive those numbers down on the front end, if that makes sense to you.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's just a 30,000
Yeah.
foot view.
Yeah,
It goes back to the contingent upon the school
contingent
funding.
upon school
That's
funding.
where I'm at.
Okay.
You too.
Yeah. Sarah, do you have any strong thoughts? Okay.
So just to make sure we're clear, you're okay with both, or all the 3 positions? Okay.
Well, 2 have already been implemented, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's really just the 1 that's contingent upon, okay. I know we haven't touched on water and sewer rates, and we absolutely need to talk about that, and I'm sure there are other items in the budget, but I'm gonna call a 5-minute break.
Okay,
Okay,
and I have another meeting at 7,
okay.
or a little before.
Well, hopefully we're out here by then.
Well, I hope.
My goodness. Are you gonna buy me dinner?
Greg set us up for what he's expecting.
Oh, my goodness.
So Chief, the dogs,
You know, it'd make it a lot easier on me if I got paid.
I know, or if they bought us dinner,
Huh?
or if they bought us dinner. I'm just kidding.
You know, it's 6 open positions right now.
No.
Yeah, that's right. And Chief has
Just saying.
7. Okay, out of respect for Brian, I thought maybe we could jump over to the water and sewer rate before we address additional items in the budget. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And I don't know how late you plan on going, but we do have the June 21st meeting that we could continue discussion.
Okay,
It seems to be going well to me.
yeah. No, it's,
But it would give us an opportunity to dive into the budget a little bit more. Since we
Whether
got
we go to June
so
21st.
late.
Yeah, if we got some stuff done. So we need-
I do have I have to leave town at noon on the 21st. I'm not sure what our regular agenda looks like. Any,
Right now, it's pretty light. You know, we'll have a staff meeting and probably look at some things, but when I talk to Linda, we have a pretty light meeting, I think.
And you're back by 6.
Or, well, I should say, I'm thinking the 28th. I'd
Yeah.
have to check on the 21st.
do we have a meeting on the 21st?
At 6.
We do. Okay. Okay. No, I'm not back by 6.
Okay.
Well, you'll just have to post your
That's your screen.
Yeah, well,
Oh, it's, okay, yeah. Let me get my calendar updated. Well, let's go ahead and go over budget rate, or, water and sewer rates, and we can talk more about the general fund budget on the 21st. I do think we need to have an answer on the stormwater utility tonight, as well, so have at it.
Okay, thank you. So basically, just bring this back. So back on May 24th, we talked to the council about water and sewer rates, and we got some direction about looking at 2 alternate water rate increase scenarios, and also looking at a regional comparison of the commercial water rates. Again, how do we compare to Newton's and Wichita's? So that's what this presentation is going through. And the first thing I'd like to do is just look at the commercial regional comparison. So looked around at Salina, McPherson, Newton, Wichita, and Manhattan, and basically looked at 4 different levels of commercial and industrial water use. This is the very large, and in very large, I'm talking, it's about 50 million gallons a year. So we've got, let me just take a step back. So we've got 14,800 residential customers that we serve. We've got 1,361 industrial and commercial customers that we serve. So our very large category is roughly around 50 million gallons a year. That's 4 customers that we have that are in that range. This comparison is very similar for our very large, our medium, and our low customers. So again, very similar. And you can see that Hutchinson and our 2022 and our 2023 compare favorably to those folks. Fairly close to the city of McPherson and the city of Manhattan. We're lower than Salina and lower than Newton. Wichita is the one that is lower than us, but there is a caveat with Wichita and Salina. They both have a block schedule that's based on their average winter consumption of water. So they look at the months of December through March. And if a customer goes 110 to 120% above that average winter consumption, their volumetric rate increases dramatically.
Okay.
So for the city of Wichita, for example, the normal rate is basically $2 every 100 cubic foot. If they go above 110% of their average winter consumption, it's $7.26 for every 100 cubic foot. So that's a 350% increase for that water above their normal average winter consumption. Salina is very similar, $4.17 in HCF, and it goes to $8.35 if they go above 120% of their average winter consumption. So a little bit of a caveat, a little bit tough to understand exactly what some of those commercial and industrial businesses might be doing, but I think this gives us a good snapshot. So are there any questions about that regional comparison?
That's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You did a good job.
Very good. Move on to our next slide. And so this is basically the definition of the two alternate scenarios that we looked at. That very top is the baseline, is what we presented back on May 24th. And it averages out to be a 5.5% increase of revenue on an annual basis for the next 5 years. Alternate one, we adjusted the annual minimum charge, increased that 1%, and we decreased the volumetric charge 1%, so 3% and 6%, and that gives us an average increase of 4.95, and then alternate two gives us an average increase of 4.3.
So does this translate to residents versus business when you're talking volumetric?
Volumetric.
Or is it all just business right now?
It applies to everybody. It
Okay.
applies to residents and it applies to our industrial and commercial. It impacts, very minimal impact to residents because they use so much less volume
Okay.
than some of our very large customers do. The biggest impact to those categories.
Yeah, because I brought up that I was concerned at 7% year over year.
Mhm.
That's an annual increase every single year. I
Mhm.
felt would, especially if you do look at, right now, we're hanging in there with everybody else. I don't think after 4 or 5 years, we'd be hanging in there with everybody else. That was my,
Yeah, everybody
Major
else is also
concern.
having these conversations about increasing though too. Maybe
I
not
don't
this
know,
year, but next year.
7% though. Are
Yeah,
they?
I mean, probably not. I think the impetus for the larger
I was
increase was the
comfortable-
fact that we didn't
Yeah.
increase for so many years. And so
Yeah.
now we're in this position, right?
Yeah.
Right. We're trying to play catch up. And
I-
really, what we're trying to do is fund the water main replacement program. Again, our goal is to replace 3 miles a year. And by the end of this program, we start to get there. We start to generate enough revenue to be able to fund that program fully.
How many
And that's the goal.
miles per year is alternate two? What does that do?
Well, and we'll get to that.
I'm sorry, I'm
Yep.
getting ahead of myself.
Yep, nope,
Go
that's
ahead.
fine, that's fine.
And the guy that we hired to do this, he helps us with these sorts of things. Does he help Wichita, Salina, McPherson as well advise?
Oh, Burns McDowell,
Yeah,
they're all over.
They are the biggest in.
Okay.
they are, I don't know that Wichita hires them to do
Okay.
this analysis necessarily, but they do work all over the country. Yeah. Okay, so those are basically the 3 alternates that we've got, the one we presented on May 24th, and then these 2 additional ones that we've looked at. And the next slide is basically, I'm gonna buzz through this because I've got a slide in a couple, but this is basically the baseline bill impact. Then we've got alternate 1 bill impact and alternate 2 bill impact. So if you really want to dive into the details, that is in that presentation that was emailed to everybody. But in general, you can see, again, we're looking at a very large user, which is 4 customers, and we're looking at our large users, which are about 7 customers out of those 1,300. So these 2 scenarios impact about 11 of our customers. And we've got the existing customer bill for 2022 rate is $15,341. The baseline is a $1,100 increase. If we go with alternate 1, it's a $932 increase, and if we go with alternate 2, got a $772 increase a month.
That's just for 1 year.
Yep, and that is 1 year. That would go to basically 2023.
And how many businesses fall within that?
Within that is 4 businesses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at after the 5-year stretch, there was quite a bit of an increase.
Right,
Before,
it's
yeah,
every year.
Because it compounds.
Right.
So,
Right. And so,
because it's a percentage increase, it's actually compounding.
and that's,
Quite a bit bigger after your 5 years.
yeah, it's roughly 7% increase for the baseline, 6% increase for alternate 1, and 5% increase roughly for alternate 2.
What does each alternate do to our ability to reach those goals? How far does it push out our ability to do those 3 miles each?
Yeah, so that's our next slide. So this is the implications if we were to go with alternate 1 or alternates 2. So we're basically going to lower the total rate increases. We're gonna lower the amount of revenue that we generate over that 5-year period. And so alternate one, over that 5-year period, is going to bring in $700,000 less. So we will have to find cuts of $700,000 to make up for that lost revenue, which is about a 13% reduction in the cash funding of our capital projects. Alternate two, you can see, is about $1.26 million less revenue that we would bring in over that 5-year period, resulting in about a 23% cut.
So that 5-year program is like a $5 million program?
That is over the total 5 years.
For the total 5 years, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, roughly we're cash funding around $5 to $6 million
Okay.
worth of projects over that 5-year period. And so the risks for going with alternate one or alternate two is probably we'll look at running down our cash balances quicker. Not able to cash fund some of the projects, maybe look at more bonding or a reduction in the amount of, say, water line replacement that we'll do over those 5 years. And then there's the potential chance for looking at a bigger rate increase come 2028 at the end of this 5-year period, depending on where we stand and how much water we sold. So that is the last slide. So happy to answer any questions.
Can you go back to the first slide with the alternate one and alternate two?
Yeah, you bet. There you go.
I'm trying to look at the difference. I don't know. I mean, I am in favor of alternate two, but over the 5-year course, there is a significant difference between alternate one and alternate two shortfall, just for that 0.45% on the system revenue, right? So do we, whatever, like, what are you guys' thoughts? I'm kind of leaning towards alternate one. I didn't know what anybody else's thoughts were.
Well, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of the baseline annual minimum charge percent increase at 2% being lower than 3%. So I think your residential customers aren't gonna see as much of a change on baseline versus alternate one.
Right.
It's more of your big commercial customers are gonna see the big difference in their bill.
It is. This basically impacts our commercial and industrial, our largest customers the most.
I'm not comfortable with the 7% compounding interest over the next 7 years. That chart he showed you about where we're at, we're gonna fly up.
That's where we're at in comparison to the other ones. If they
Right
don't,
now.
if they don't, right, but that, if they don't change either,
Yeah.
and I get the compounding interest, I mean, it's,
But I don't think, I don't know, we have a good resource with water here. I don't think we should.
we also have a large cost in aging water infrastructure that we're trying to catch up to. We should be higher than where we're at right now.
I'm not comfortable with the, as presented, no way. I'm comfortable with alternate one.
I look at benchmarking always, and if you want to show that slide again, I feel like we're below comparable cities right there
Where are we below?
in 23. The average is the gray line.
That's right.
But the
Salina,
average is,
Right.
you know how averages work, right? The reason why the average is sitting right there is probably because Newton's so high.
eh,
So I'm gonna look at here, here, and here. Where do I feel that's probably gonna set? It's probably more close to right here. Because you have an outlier like in your average line.
So the 2023,
So we're right at average, if I were to look at it at a.
well, I think the 2023, which is,
Yes, line
reflects the
investment.
original proposal, puts us at an average of our other benchmarked communities. And that's the original proposal with the 2.7, correct?
Yes.
I'm okay with leaving it at that.
I think we should go alternate one. I'm really a cautious view against a 7% increase, especially that much towards our.
and it affects how many customers?
14 total.
Well-
4 for the
total.
big one, 14 total.
Yeah, so it is,
And I'm not.
on
okay with
the
that.
very
I really
large,
think
we got
need
about
to
4
consider-
customers, and on the large, we got about 7 customers in
Think
that
about what
large
we
range.
put into the stormwater utility fee.
Do what?
Think about the stormwater utility fee, when it was just, man,
Right.
you're talking 7% year over year. I would like to see alternate 2, but at the difference of just the 0.45 and the capital outlay effects, that kind of made me think, okay, alternate 2 isn't the way to go. But I really think we should consider alternate.
How do you answer the no increase for 4 years? I mean, that, we're already behind and, we just,
No, we're running average.
I hear you and I'd probably be okay with alternate 1.
Alternate 1.
But I just, we're dealing with something that was identified in 2017 over in Farmington Park. I realize it's not water or sewer, it's stormwater. We identified it in 2017, we just agreed to do it in 2022, in the middle of the year. I mean, we
Don't go with
just,
the presented one, I'm telling you guys.
I think we're just gonna have this conversation in a few more years if we don't make the hard decision now. I mean,
No,
I'm
we're not
okay
making-
putting it off, but
Alternative 2 is still increasing.
not gonna
It's still
be here.
increasing, guys, still a 6% increase. It's one that's not gonna, it's gonna not,
alternate 1 you're talking about.
Yes.
No, you said 2.
it's just a better form of funding. And it's, you're talking about 13%. I'm just really cautioning you guys, don't.
yeah, I definitely won't go with 2.
I said I'd be
Alternate 1.
fine with alternate 1. I don't want to handicap us, but we can,
I think
Two
it's a
things.
compromise, and I think it's not something that's
I
gonna
like-
stranglehold some
I
of
like
those fire
compromise,
people.
but there are 2 things here, in my opinion. We pay people to tell us where we need to be, and we went a long time with no increase. I hate everything's going up. I don't like it, but it's the world we live in, and to have nice things, it costs money.
I just really think we need to go with alternate 1.
It's gonna put, that's more on your residential customers on fixed
But
incomes.
it'd only be like $1.
Yeah, I do have a slide
Yeah, that'd be
that shows the residential impact, and it is pretty minor. Oops, oh, man.
We got caught in stranglehold on our job traders. Yeah, I'm telling you.
Oh, no, that's important
Same
too.
with the
I mean,
storm water, I'm telling
Okay.
you, alternate 1's the way to go.
So
That's
there's,
still high if you ask me.
there's the residential impact. You can look at the baseline. For a small user in 2027 is 2177, and it goes up to 2199 with alternate 1 and 2161 with alternate 2.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
What, do you feel like it's hurt? Is it gonna, how much is it gonna hurt your program? I know we went over the slide,
how much is it gonna hurt what? Sorry.
the program.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, it's,
The preferred, how much is it gonna hurt our job traders?
Oh, well, I
that's
think
part
our
of
job
this.
creators need good infrastructure.
I know they
Two.
do too, but I think it's a good compromise. I mean, you're still talking about 6% compounding interest of the thing. I mean, that's not a big, that's still a big deal. I think we're catching up at a good rate.
I just know that I was at a grand opening for the new Kansas Gas in South Hutch. Was that 2 weeks ago? 1 week ago? And they moved from downtown Hutch because of flooding issues. So, I mean, we can't pretend that having a fully funded infrastructure program does not impact viability of businesses and their choice to locate here. So it's not divorced, right? Those two
It's not like
items.
we're not increasing it at all.
I know, I'm just saying, you get what you pay for when it comes to infrastructure. And if we don't want to fully fund it, there will be ramifications.
I just don't want to spend money on utilities. We're just like,
I'm,
stacking on top of
again, I'm fine with going with alternate one, but I felt like the presentation by Burns and McDonald's was pretty thorough and convincing as to where we needed to be, so.
That's just a gold star standard. I say we need to set an alternative 1.
I'm all right with alternative one, but I'd like to see this presentation next year again and compare the water rates. Compare to our other cities next year and how they've changed year over year.
Right,
Same graph.
okay,
And see if we're on pace.
right.
See what the other cities did next year and then, okay.
And if we need to adjust them.
Are you good with that? Does the staff?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. Okay. Thank you.
So only 2.5 miles a year now instead of 3
Right.
a year.
By the end of the
Change it to
program.
kilometers now.
Next year it's about a mile and a half.
Oh, kilometers now.
A kilometer, yeah, 5 kilometers instead of 6.
Where are we on the stormwater?
Are we gonna recess the rest?
Is that you, Jeff?
Well, I guess I can start off with that. Do you have anything, Angela? Okay, I did actually just bring those option sheets, just in case
Okay.
if it came up too. And this,
Are we gonna continue or are we gonna put this off?
Just stormwater, yeah, I think they need some answers, and,
Yeah.
we've had multiple meetings and kind of been
thank you.
hesitant to make a decision. We have to make a decision for staff, they need direction.
Right. And I didn't really have a whole presentation provided, but I just wanted you guys to see, as we went through the stormwater utility, and you can see this, these are projects, and these are actually ones that we're actually having to put off that are recommended to go forward. If you look at option one, under the current stormwater utility fee, we've already moved out Sand Hills diversion box replacement, which was recommended to be completed out of the next 5 years. And the important part is if you go to the second page, you can see where our bonding costs each year. We roughly want to spend about $1.1 million on the big picture projects or the flood reduction projects. And if you use the current one, at about 2027, we're already at about $1.3 million in just bond payments. So moving forward, we wouldn't be able to do, we'd like to keep at least our maintenance projects going forward, even at our current rate going forward with the stormwater utility fee. So reducing that would push other projects off, and then our bonding capacity, I mean, we'd have about 600,000 of bonding capacity at that point with the projects that we have planned out. And so really we're just completing maintenance projects after that at about $325,000 a year plus $100,000 for the street projects.
So are you saying that if we go from 475 to 352, our bond capacity goes down to 600?
Well, no,
Or-
what projects we can actually bond for.
Oh, okay.
We can only bond for about $600,000.
Do other cities have different rate structures for stormwater and utility?
Typically, the most common one is the rate structure that we have. About 80 to 90% of stormwater utilities have this type of rate structure. We previously had one based on the size of a property, of what a property owner owned, I guess. But it was a nominal fee. It was like $1 or $2, but the largest one, it was $64 was the maximum. But typically, this is the major way to do it, and it's the most.
And what is our
It's the most equal.
ERUs? Like, does it have a scaling ERU?
It does not.
Is there a step level ERU? Is there any way we could tweak the way we collect these to?
We were just trying to make it the most equal to all of the, I mean, it's, what you get a benefit for is what you pay for, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the way it's set up at this point, so.
I think the question for the council is, what do you want the program service level to be? Do you want it to make a difference in flooding? Do you want to have maintenance only?
And that's what it could be too. And
with reducing it, we actually push off even completing our Cow Creek utility expansion till for another 5 years. I mean, we get initial portions done, but it doesn't complete the project. So
And we did nothing before this stormwater utility.
it was a nominal, it was paid for, and it was very minor, like $10,000 per year that was paid for out of the sanitary sewer side of the projects, I believe. Wasn't
So
it,
we
Glenn?
collected this like nominal amount, and then we had to certify our levy. And we
Correct.
had that federal mandate, and everything we had was exhausted, and
Yes.
some.
And we bonded that, and we're still paying the bonds on those repairs.
And that was
Uh,
10 years ago?
Almost 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So this was implemented, our current fee structure went live essentially in 2016, so it's been this way for 7 years.
Yeah.
It went live all right, because I was in your office the day after I got.
Yeah, you probably were.
No, I
remember you-
was.
Yeah, you were, I think you were.
That's how we met.
That's how I met Greg, with him calling to complain about something.
What? I've never called a council member.
So
Maybe.
we still have
You
challenges
called me.
going forward where we're still in the process of like actually identifying problems that we have. I mean, we haven't fully televised the whole system. Just this last fall, we have the Superior Street project, which even doing phase 1 is $3 million. So I believe we're gonna have more projects such as that begin to show up and impact even what we have, just to maintain those.
I wasn't here
Are
when
we
you,
utilizing like any kind of grant funds for sewer and water? And, because I know that every chance we get on these,
On the storm sewer
like is there any
side,
kind of infrastructure type?
we did chase some grant funding for one of our large flood reduction projects.
Yeah.
And we chased it for 2 years, and we were kind of dragged along and promised, it's looking good, and then it never
In the end,
materialized.
it came down to that we didn't have any people that had flood insurance, essentially, in the area that we wanted to do the work, so.
Like if
Well, I
you're-
just know that like water and sewer, that's supposed to be a big thing on the whole infrastructure and the ARPA
Yeah,
funds.
and that is
all of
correct.
that.
We are looking for funding all the time and opportunities, but we
Is
got,
there any of the ARPA funds that we could use to fund some of these if we take them out?
Well, I think we discussed using the majority of the city's portion for Woody Seat, but Angela, you can remind me what
Yeah,
that.
we did. So like half of it was going to go towards what we're doing the RFP for. And then our half, or we would subtract the 440,000 that the fire department got, and the rest of it would go to Woody Seat. I mean, that is
The
always
thing
something
about the
cheap.
ARPA too, remind me if I'm wrong here, those not only have to be encumbered by 2024, but expended by 2026. And some of these projects are probably
Yeah.
multi-phase, multi-year.
some of them are, but it may complete a phase.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it would definitely, I think Sarah would definitely put a dent in something we needed right away, but it eliminates an ongoing revenue stream to continue maintenance and new projects. And we have a lot of flooding in Hutch.
I keep
And
waiting.
continue to identify more projects just because of
I
failing
just know sewer and
infrastructure.
water was one of the.
Well, I keep
things
waiting
that-
on the federal monies more to come down because
I think a lot of those are in the state phase. The state will pass those out, and they're still creating
Collating the
programs.
rules and the
Yeah.
program for the.
So yeah, they'll be administered state, sorry.
no, I'm sorry. Jeff, normally when you start a program like this, the fees are based on a plan.
Correct.
You know, whether it's, I don't know, it's a multi-year plan. I don't know whether they said 7, 10, whatever.
Well, when it was actually created, they actually have the actual rate that we needed to complete something in 25 years, so they spread it out over 50 years, essentially, is what they did at the time.
But, and so you're following that plan right now in order to try to get those those projects, I mean, a lot of them have been identified, you're probably identifying some more, but this is carry you through that plan, right?
Correct. And we also have the discussion going on with the state fair. If we reduce fees, we probably wouldn't be able to do the projects associated with the state fair area also.
Well, and that really not only takes in, that's kind of, I'll just say, a kind of a regional
It is. Detention.
project, because it doesn't, it not only takes care of the state fair, but that whole area over there along.
It's the east side drain, actually,
Yeah.
and it covers quite a large portion of the community.
And it greatly reduces the state fair's
Yeah.
stormwater utility, which is,
Correct.
is a pretty big,
I think they are one of the largest.
yeah. Because again, the goal isn't to charge people money. It's to disincent impervious area, so that
Going
we
forward, you're
can,
correct.
so that we can eliminate flooding,
Or minimize.
or minimize, yeah.
And to build and maintain the infrastructure
Yeah.
necessary to deal with the runoff that
Yeah.
those impervious areas create.
It's not an arbitrary fee, it's,
And some of this is deferred maintenance over the years too.
Yeah.
We're just, again, I know it's a recurring theme, but it's something that we're
yeah.
trying to put a dent in and start on our way back to catching up with some of those.
But, I mean, I think the state fair is in the top 5 payers. And, you know, by having the capacity and the revenue to do that project, it's gonna help flooding for the whole community, and it's gonna way lower their fees. So we eliminate one of those big user fees. Not eliminate,
No.
not eliminate, but. I think a lot of time, thought, and community engagement went into the creation of this, and I'd hate to see us take a step back because we didn't do anything about it for decades, and I would just hate for our community to take a step back on this.
Yeah, and a lot of cities, particularly this size, have experienced this because they've grown, and over time, they really haven't accommodated stormwater. And so you get all the buildings, and you get that impervious area, and it keeps building out. And so then you run into these flooding problems. So a lot of cities over the last probably 20 years have come up with these kind of programs to try to take care of that because of the flooding issues.
Well, if we want to have nice things, we have to pay for them.
What about the businesses that aren't new builds? Like, what do we have to help them reduce their stormwater utility? Do we have a program that can at least help, or funding?
Those are the ones that were taken by surprise with this whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
But don't we have an entire stack of ways to minimize?
There is a number of ways to minimize, though it is for existing,
It's hard to retrofit.
it's hard to retrofit some of those. It's not impossible, but there's a cost to do that also to those businesses. Like some of ours is detention and,
like, do we have?
So
any-
what about when
Drainage
we're
swales.
standing up
Help
those
incentivize that.
ARPA programs for small business assistance? Like if we could provide, or that could be maybe one of the ways, like we could provide small grants to, I don't know, work with engineering to offset some of that runoff so that you could lower your monthly fee. I don't know, that's just one.
Yeah,
idea.
I was just saying, like, what can we do to help
I think it's a great
mitigate some
point.
of that expense?
Get rid of concrete.
And it would
plant
also
grass.
help,
Yeah.
I mean, it would help our infrastructure as well, if we have the old businesses retrofitting,
Mm-hmm,
because you're
Mhm.
pulling it off of ours, so maybe we need
You're
to
correct.
consider
yeah.
you are correct.
an like, if we can't lower the fee per se this way, can we lower the fee by offering expanded incentives to get some of our older, already pre-existing?
That's a good idea. Maybe we need to start to look at something
Yeah,
like
can we
that.
look at that?
We would just need to have pool of money. You know, like anything else, like sidewalks, we need a pool of money, housing incentives, we need a pool of
Well, I
money.
was just saying the ARPA. thing.
Yeah, but I think
Outside.
that could fall into one of those buckets
Yeah,
that we designated for ARPA, because we did want some of that money to go to small business
yeah.
assistance and economic development.
And I think that Angela and I talked, and I know you wanted to have a meeting where you talked about splitting those funds. And so we're going to have that on, we're talking about the, I think either the 21st or the July 5th, because we'll be getting some proposals. Well, I guess the proposals are due on the 28th, is that right?
Can you,
So
can you come
Probably
up,
July
sorry, come up with some incentive ideas and what those costs would, you know?
It would vary.
From
Yeah.
business
It
to
would,
business.
it wouldn't be one size fit all.
I know.
There's not a way to really do that because everybody's situation is a little bit different, Sarah.
I know, but like if you could go and look at some of our more high-paying facilities, and maybe we could start being more proactive instead of
And then
reactive.
the highest paying ones are actually like the hospital.
Yeah, and being like more proactive
And
of, hey, we've looked at your
Dillon's
property.
and, I mean, they're ones that,
This
that
could
they
be
have those
done.
costs of doing businesses no matter where they're at, those types of,
And,
Yeah.
and leadership from those organizations were on the
they were. But,
Stormwater Utility Advisory Committee.
correct.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if we looked at some of our bigger players and proactively said, hey, we've looked at your property, you know, we've got some of this incentives, what kind of incentives would that be? What kind of cost or bucket would we need to pull from these funds? And actually approach them. 'Cause
That would be a-
also-
Sarah, we did send out 100 letters to
I'm not saying that.
So,
I'm not asking
yeah.
what you did prior to.
Well, that was
the
very
fees.
proactive, is what I'm
That-
saying. And
that
there was
was
a lot
proactive
of
and-
conversations
That
that
was
happened.
proactive in letting people know the program was good. I'm talking
And
about
also
something
about the
completely different.
incentives
And
that
how
are
to
out
mitigate,
there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm talking about having somebody specifically saying, hey, if you put a retention, well, here's our new incentive, like, we have this is what your fee will then be, and right now, we're waiving these fees and we'll match you this.
So if, thinking about people that have large parking lots that don't utilize the entire parking
Yeah.
lot, right sizing the parking lot, which that
Yeah.
gets into a planning and zoning aspect too, which of things have
Where they
changed
can put
there.
some green space in and reduce
Well,
their
some things have
parking.
changed in regards to how much parking lot's required.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
think of a large
we minimized
retailer
a lot of
that
that.
might utilize their entire parking lot once a year.
Yeah, but
And-
what about the people that already have that big parking lot?
Well, that's where I'm getting at on the
Yeah.
incentive aspect of it,
Mhm.
is perhaps some of the areas that are not heavily trafficked, if you want to convert that back over to green space.
Yeah, and we have an incentive to help
We have an
match some
incentive
of
to help
the.
that cost.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking of large car lots
Mhm.
and their back lots
Yeah.
that are not, that are just for staging used cars or something like that, don't have to be paved, maybe we allow them to be gravel. Or another solution, we offer something there. There's ways to do it. Some of this is gonna have to go with planning and zoning too, in regards to
Yeah.
right sizing parking lots,
Mhm.
because parking lots are the big cost.
Because if we can't do something here, why don't we get creative to try to bring stuff off of our infrastructure from the already pre-existing?
Or we even talked about, being able to having, I don't know if it'd be a point system, but if someone has a property where they're keeping more water on their property than they actually use, being able to sell off some of that to someone else, some of that, volume, or,
Yeah,
gosh, you know where I'm
It's
going.
like-
kind of like a cap and trade.
It's trading credits.
Yeah.
Trading credits, like people do with emissions credits.
Mhm.
But similar deal where, you know, hey, I've got 5 acres of green grass in the industrial park and I can create a detention pond here and everyone around me can keep their water here and
Yeah.
pay me $500 a month and it'll help offset your stormwater fees or something like that. Because there's properties around like that.
So I guess, yeah.
Doesn't help you on
So-
30th Street that much or on Main Street that much.
It doesn't help in those because there's not a lot.
There's not a lot of space.
Yeah.
Or a lot down Fourth Avenue is kind of that way too, going east. It's pretty well developed, but.
Right.
fully developed areas are difficult to deal with.
That's the one, those are usually the ones that are getting hit.
That are
first.
that we are having an issue with, this is just too high, and they do not have the opportunity to do the reduction in fees like
Hey,
other businesses
Do
coming
you
in.
mind taking a minute to talk about what incentives are in place now and what businesses have been made aware of? And maybe we're talking about some of the things we already do and I just can't remember.
Yeah, and Jeff should have, you have a list of what the reductions are?
I do. I don't have it with me today.
And you
It's
said that was
online.
sent out to
It's online, we've
all
all seen it,
businesses?
Dave.
We sent out a notice of what the stormwater
That's just gonna waste
is
time.
going to be and ask them to.
Well, you're kind of asking him to do the same thing I think he's done, and so it would be nice before we create new incentives to understand if some of the incentives are already created. And
Incentives,
you,
okay, we already know the incentives, I know that you've looked at it, I know you've looked at it, I know I've looked at it, it's online. We're talking about lots of pre-existing that are, it's difficult for them to take advantage of those incentives.
so
And
you're
that's-
wanting a person to go to these businesses or connect them to ways that they can retrofit or ways they might
And
use.
help pay for it,
And help pay for it.
and
Yeah.
still charge them at the current rate until
Yeah.
they fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what we're gonna do if you fix it. Although when they do fix it, they do get a big reduction on
Yeah, they
this.
do, yeah.
So
But
that-
it is utilizing areas to get it
And
off the
I think this
ground.
takes a larger discussion, and it actually will take some time to, and maybe some public
Yeah.
input going
I
forward.
I think you're right, but I think what I'm hearing is there, and correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't necessarily an appetite to eliminate or decrease service levels, the program right now. But we could do some work on the other side, which is trying to,
Help those most impacted
Yeah.
who do not have a position currently to feasibly
Yeah.
retrofit their properties.
Which
but I need to
helps.
hear, I think staff needs to hear, do we keep a 475 ERU?
I think we keep the 475 ERU and we look at ways to help local business and mitigate the burden on the stormwater system at the same time.
Off of the
Yeah,
city.
because it's mutually beneficial.
Yes.
And we're looking at using some of the ARPA funds to help those businesses build that infrastructure.
Well, I think it could fall within that small business assistance, economic development bucket. It could.
I really don't want it in that bucket, I think it needs to be part of our bucket, and maybe we need to reevaluate how much of the
How
ARPA
much
is
do we
going
have
towards
left,
Woody
Angela?
Seat. Does that make sense?
In the city side, after Woody Seat and Fire Department, how much do
Oh,
we have
there's,
left?
like, what do you see would take up the whole thing?
Yeah.
Or maybe we need
So-
to adjust the Woody Seat.
I'm on more of it.
I'm not ready to do that. I
Yeah.
want to leave it where we had it
Yeah.
personally. I'm sure we can find a way to do this in some way, shape, or form in regards to mitigating and incentivizing.
Mhm.
I don't want to bond more on Woody Seat.
I don't either. But I think staff has direction on this item at least. Maintain the 475 ERU and,
Figure out a way to put together an incentive or,
mhm.
I think that it might take some time. I think it'll take more than just us working in our silo here. We'll have to, I think it'll involve some public
Yeah.
discussions and also some.
I don't know that we're necessarily talking about changing that
No,
program.
no.
But reaching out to businesses. to-
Walking them through how they can.
Yeah. The one issue, I don't want to speak for Jeff, but it's staff time, and he's a couple engineers down.
Yeah.
And so, there's only so much that staff has time for. So I guess setting priorities, but that's something that Jeff will figure out. I'm
Well, I
sure.
do think that the community has indicated on the business side that this is a huge priority for them, right? They want to know how they can lower their burden. So maybe we contract it out. You're probably contracting out everything, aren't you, right now?
Not yet. Not yet. Some of them.
Well, maybe you can mull that over, but at least you know
Yep.
that the ERU stays.
Okay.
What else you got, John?
I was gonna say some small business owners will probably already have an idea of, I'd like to have less parking lot, and tell me how much less I can have,
Yeah.
and what that's gonna benefit me,
Mhm.
and what it's gonna cost me to do it.
Yeah, and it's gonna take off that,
And we do have
That
people come in
first,
each
like-
year and actually ask us some of these questions.
Mhm.
And to see what they can do,
I
or,
would like to greatly reduce our parking
Yes,
standards. I know we've already done that, and that's a step in the right direction, but that's part of the reason we're in this situation, is the Kmart's of the world.
You've got some parking lots that have acres of
Mhm.
asphalt. An
Yeah.
acre is
The old
what?
Target and
12,
Kmart.
13 ERUs per acre, somewhere like that, 15 ERUs an acre, was it 3,100, 3,200
it's
square
about,
feet?
yeah, 3120.
3,120?
yeah, I think we need to talk about the ones that are already in place and what we can do to scale those back.
Mhm.
Have them ripped up and more green space put in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can think of a couple that would participate in a, what can we do example.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I've got a question to ask you guys. I read the stuff and I'm learning more and more about it. The more parking lot, the more runoff you have. Is that
Correct.
how that works?
Mhm.
Okay, so if you reduce their parking lot, then of course you're gonna have less runoff. If you put more grass there, then the water just stays there and goes down to the aquifer.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah.
my thinking there?
Exactly.
So that's why you're going with the reduced, the parking lot, so it has less runoff to the system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which seems very, I guess, rational to us, but is like anathema in the planning world,
But
just so you
doesn't,
know.
don't we require so many parking lot spaces when they put the building down?
We do,
Okay.
so I guess that's my point is we, as a city, have created some of these problems
Right.
with our parking standards.
Right.
And as long, yeah, it's a much greater conversation about, like I said, we've already reduced parking standards once, but we could probably do a lot more work.
And that's where you're in a downtown area, they don't have much parking anyway, so they don't have this
Mhm.
where they can get cheaper rates and reduce their
Yeah.
parking lots, am I right?
Yeah, so basically having a discussion about, one, maybe reducing our parking standards, but two, creating incentives to those people that had already put in the big parking lots, have an incentive or a way that's cost neutral to pull it back up.
Is there a
They're
way
just
you
gonna
can-
leave it there because they already put the cost in putting it there.
Right.
Brian,
They
can
might not have the
you
funds
use
available
any
to
of
correct it.
Asphalt
You
or,
put in incentive
grinding
or
up
discussion to try to
concrete,
get them to take it out.
maybe that would be a way that
We
would
reduce some of the
help us
stress on our own system, they
as a
we
city.
got quite,
have a
Yeah.
reduction in their
we're getting
fee.
quite a bit.
During the arterial mill and overlay projects, we get more millings than what we have to do with.
I'll take it.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
I would take it, but my stormwater utility fee would go up.
I think that provides staff with the direction they need. Gary and Angela, what else do you need from us before our next general fund session? Like, what are we holding you up on?
Well, I think that we've made a lot of progress tonight. I want to thank everyone. You know, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Angela. And I think at this point, just go ahead and take a look at the budget, and if there's any questions you have, let us know. We can talk about that at the next meeting, but there's a lot of the critical things we took care of tonight. Certainly appreciate that. You know, it's tough putting it together because, and I know you guys have very difficult decision because it's always that balance. We did this all night trying to balance things out. You know, I asked staff to cut 5%. And some of them were able to get fairly close and some of them were not, just because of the things that are going on within their department. So I really want to thank staff for, you know, their work. Angela has done an incredible job with this, and I really want to thank her for what she's done. But you know, you all have a tough job. I really appreciate your input tonight or today, and if you have any questions, we'll kind of address the budget if there's any specific questions you have, but with what we and we'll have to just take a look at it and kind of update a few things probably. And I think unless you have questions, I think we're getting pretty well done.
Do you think we could tag on the 6 p.m. budget session on the 21st on the council meeting?
I think it really depends on what questions
Right.
you all have with the
So
budget.
maybe
because I
we can
think-
do that work before and send them to you.
Because I think right now, all that would be left to do is follow up with your questions.
Mhm.
If you're comfortable with where the ending general fund balance is, that's all we have left, because you've made the other decisions that we needed
Yeah.
to make.
Well, and these other additions to FTEs, I mean, are we all in agreement that we're gonna just I mean, we stopped after
Oh.
Chief Hooper got.
Those were just swaps.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
the three we've already, oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay, gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
We're discussing the increases, the rest are just.
Okay, very good.
Just kind of let you know as a overall, how many
Okay.
additional positions. So really, the critical decisions were made tonight, so unless you do have questions, and if you do have questions, if you want to send them to me or to Angela or something, so that we kind of know, we might be able to answer it. Certainly we can, if you just have an individual question, but if there's things you think we need to discuss, we can discuss it at the next meeting on the 21st. But I think we're pretty well there.
Great. Do you think we could take just 1 minute to go ahead and set up a meeting to discuss ARPA? You said that should happen on the 5th. Did you want that to happen during
Well,
the day? Or?
we talked about maybe, we have the applications for the ARPA RFPs that are due on the 28th. And so we thought we'd bring those to you, as well as, talk about ARPA and how we want to divide, or how you want to divide it up
Mhm.
at the same time.
So what date are you thinking for that, since they're due on the 28th?
It depends on how many applicants that we have and how much we have to go through to award that. If there's not much interest, or if it's not a hard decision, we could probably come back July 5th and do that. If there are more applicants, then it might be the meeting after that.
We'll know a little bit more tomorrow, because we have a meeting tomorrow to answer questions. They should either show up or, come in through electronic means to visit with us to get the information. So we may have a pretty good idea tomorrow if how many we might have interested in.
Okay. All right. Well, I think with that, then we will just plan to adjourn until our next regularly scheduled agenda meeting. Okay. Thank you all. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you for being patient with Greg and his weird questions.